Hey, Vanna. Hey, Barbara. Hey, PK. It is hot today. I had to go to the grocery store and, yeah, wasn't very fun. Luckily, the grocery store isn't that far a walk, so it wasn't that big a deal, but still. No rain in forecast. What I get from the grocery store? No, groceries for the week ahead. Lunches and or microwave dinners and snacks. It's just the stuff I'll eat for the next few days, the next week. Plants are thirsty, and so are we. Got it delivered. Yeah, I mean, I'm close enough to the store that it's. I may as well walk down. Turkey clubs, cool. A feeder. Yeah, Dandy doesn't really show up anymore. It's I don't know what's going on with him. I assume he's just busy living his life. Would be my guess. J Dot, hey J Dot. Hey Lady MK. Another chat like a week ago. Yeah, J Dot's here. Now it's a party. J Dot's here, so now it's a party. Do I believe dreams have meaning? Generally not. I suspect that generally they probably usually don't. Hey, Kelly. I mean, obviously, like if you have sort of like if you're anxious about something or something's heavy on your mind, then you might dream about it. But other than that, I mean, it's I think probably not. Raining all night. Funnily enough, Vanna and PK were just complaining about a lack of rain. J Dot. Looks like we'll be getting some rain tomorrow. I think. Still gonna be hot as balls. Movie that traumatized me as a kid. I don't know. I don't think I really got that many. Like, I didn't really watch that many traumatic movies. I think the closest. Why I like to complain when there's no rain. Good song, good. That is a good song. Gremlins freaked me out. I didn't. Hey, trailer. I didn't watch the original Gremlins as a kid. I watched Gremlins 2, which was a comedy. Yeah, Gremlins 2 is just straight up comedy. So that one, yeah, it didn't really freak me out. I think the one that did kind of traumatize me. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Hey, Color Purple. The scene where the judge is revealed as a tomb. Tried drinking a new Mountain Dew flavor this week. Cool, cool. That movie. Like, this, like, from the time that he starts, like, after he gets run over with the steamroller, from the time, like, from this whole start of that scene until, like, when I killed your partner, I talk like this. That, like, that whole scene. Everybody got scared from that movie? Yeah. Courage the Cowardly Dog's woman in the bathtub always got me. Like, I know most people felt traumatized by the shoe being put in the dip. That scene didn't really hit me too bad, but man, it was just such a just so creepy the way that he like got up and inflated himself, and his eyes go really wide, and yeah. Happy June 1st, yep. You too, Lady MK. Anyway, I get started in just a couple more minutes. The voice, yeah, the voice. Tim Burton's Batman? I did enjoy the Tim Burton Batman movies. I like those two. Batman Returns might be like my favorite Batman movie ever. Well, Batman Returns, well, no, not even might. Batman Returns is my favorite Batman movie. And it's not even close. It's, I mean, it's got penguins with rockets. What more could you want? Days off change? Yes, so I do have Wednesdays and Thursdays off now, Barbara, as of this week. I didn't have yesterday off because I took Monday off, so I worked yesterday to make up the hours. But going forward, Wednesdays, Thursdays are my days off. Where's Jenna? Yeah, hopefully she'll stop. Hopefully she'll be able to drop in soon. Give her 10 to 20 minutes. Yeah, something like that. Old Dark Knight. The Nolan movies? I hated Nolan's Batman movies. Genuinely, I hated Christopher Nolan's Batman movies. I thought they were pretentious, self-serious, convinced of their own genius while having so little of interest to actually say. The first one, Batman Begins, had just terrible, terrible cinematography. The shaky cam in the first one, where you can't see a goddamn thing that's going on, because the camera is like just focus your shot, jackass. Like, that was the closest I ever came to walking out of a movie, just because, like, holy shit, this is bad. It's just like a... Batman Begins is a bad movie. Dark Knight, it's... Like I said, it's pretentious, and... The truth is... And honestly... Heath Ledger delivered a great performance of a character who is not Joker. Yo, Heath Ledger was really good as somebody other than Joker. Don't remember that, like both Batmans. Give me a second. I gotta blow my nose. Give me a second. There we go. Thanks. Focus your shot, jackass. Why is it word to really Alright, so before I actually start in Dark Knight Rises prison scenes. Dark Knight Rises I didn't mind as much as the first two. I hated Dark Knight Rises less than I hated the other two. Which is funny, because that's the movie that everyone else thinks was the worst of the trilogy. But even then, I mean, there was a lot of shit. There was a lot of elements to it that were just kind of shitty. This one was worse. The Batman. I didn't hate the Batman. I thought that it could be improved. I liked that they made an effort at showing him as a detective. Because the Nolan Batman movies, he wasn't a detective. He was just a ninja. Like, he was just a straight-up ninja. No detective shit. Despite the fact that Batman's entire thing is the world's greatest detective. That is what Batman is. The world's greatest detective. Fart Garfunkel, are we gay in this game? The character I created, my player character, is non-binary. I chose to make my character non-binary, so. Kinda. AFAB, non-binary. AFAB, NB. Because, yeah, you can choose your pronouns, male, female. You can choose your pronouns, he, she, they. You can choose your character, your character's birth sex. Happy Pride, Barbara. Not going to Pride? No. No, I will not, Anunnaki. Batman is a detective? Yeah, the world's greatest detective. That is what he was created as. Don't know the gender of your kittens? That happens. It's Pride Month? Yes, it is. So yeah, like, and it's just like a Batman movie with no detective work is a shitty Batman movie. Like, I'm just like, I'm sorry, but a Batman movie where he's not where he's not doing detective work, it's a bad Batman story because you're not doing Batman, you're doing ninja. Frida? I mean, it sometimes worthwhile. Is Batman a fascist? Kind of depends on the writer. I'm inclined to think no, but all right. Should probably get into the game. It's almost 17 minutes now, so I should probably get to the game. Before I get to the game, I do want to mention DJ Cummerbund. A dude who does mashups on YouTube of various numbers of songs has a new mashup up. Hey, Jujube. So yeah, DJ Coverbund has a new mashup up. Uwa Mana. It's a mashup of Mana from the Muppets and Uwa by Disturbed. Yeah, that song. Uwa. Hey, Tragically Rose. Happy Pride Month. And, don't know. NB is non-binary, Vanna. Diablo 4? Nah, I won't be playing Diablo. No one knows. But yeah, NB is non-binary. It's shortened to NB because, like, non-binary, NB, NB. Let's down with the sickness. Whatever the song's called. The point is, it's that song where the guy goes, mixed up with Phenomena. Do 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 do. Spider-Man 2 Game of the Year prediction. I mean, I have seen vague clips. I've seen like very short clips of Tears of the Kingdom. From the looks of it, the things you can do in Tears of the Kingdom look utterly ridiculous. Like, I've seen people make, like, orbital bombardments. So, I mean, just the fact that you can do so much, the fact that you have so much freedom to play that game the way you want to play it kind of makes me inclined to think that one deserves Game of the Year instead. I'm sure Spider-Man 2 is going to be an amazing game. It's going to be, it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a lot of fun. Picking up Final Fantasy? Not for a while. But I suspect it won't have that same sense of freedom that Tears of the Kingdom gives. But anyway, while we're on the topics of games, what do I think of Shrooms? Not for me. I don't like them. Drinks! It was late enough in the day that you were surprised to hear a knock on the door. Seeing who was waiting on the other side only doubled the surprise. Good evening, Jamie. I've returned from my journey. Baxter's smile warmed like it was still the middle of the afternoon. Your confusion must have written all across your face. He laughed as if he could read your thoughts. It is hot, Trailer. It was almost a week ago that you'd found Baxter in that exact same spot. He spun a tale about how he put in place some plans to visit old acquaintances in Northern California after his parents had told him they were sending him to Sunset Bird. Baxter assumed being in the same state meant that he was reasonably close for a visit, but he learned the hard way how daunting it would be to drive himself to the opposite end of California. There. Especially because I understand California traffic is pretty bad, but California is a pretty long state. California's kind of a long state with a lot of traffic. Will I buy you a game? No. Before he left, Baxter ended that conversation with a promise. On his return, he would tell you of the arrival in person. And there he was, true to his word.
Nice to see you.
It is lovely to see you again. I feel I've been away for an age. That arrangement had seemed like a stroke of brilliance, adding more adventure to my stay in the state, and assuring myself I'd see friendly faces at least once in the season. Would I drive in California? I mean, I don't drive. Pipes got blocked. My dad finally fixed it. I'm screaming joy. Hooray, Vanna! Yet, truthfully, I wouldn't have promised such a lengthy trip away from town if I had known who my neighbor was going to be. Oh, Baxter, you incorrigible flirt. Don't stop. As pleasant as they were, my parents' friends are not as good as my own. Hey, Killface. Used a squish toy to block the pipe and a bladder to fix it. AI is going to make our games mind-blowing at Christmas. No, it won't. You know what? Hey, any interest? You know what AI will do, Jujube? It will make basic-ass games. Thoughts on VR? Not for me. Not something I'd be interested in. Hey, Wiggum. AI video games will be the same as AI art or AI stories. First of all, not actually created by AI. It's not actually intelligent. But more to the point, it's just data mining, plagiarism, and just sort of... Yeah, I mean, it's just plagiarizing other stuff and just coming up with the most... with something that's, like, based on the most common elements. So it'd be lowest common denominator video game. Which, pass. AI is big dum-dum. Yep. I hope you still had fun. Hooking his thumbs in his pockets, Baxter shifted his weight to one side. The ends of his lips curved. What if AI took my job? I suspect I would probably get it back fairly quickly. So here's the thing, Inanaki. A weight loss, something like weight loss support line, fired its staff and replaced them with ChatGPT. They had to close the that ChatGPT thing down on the line because it was like giving out unhealthy advice and like telling people like ways to, like, it was like giving people advice that would kill them or something like that. AI took my wife and kids. Yep. Yeah, it'll do that. Like, it's, like, it was genuinely, like, horrific. Like, abuse, like, it was just a terrible idea. And it's just, and it ended horribly. Not good for customer service. Nope. We'll live in the Stone Age, though? In Canada? No, this was in the U.S. Need to look that up. Sounds interesting. It was kinda. Hey, take another. Sure I did.
Thank you.
I did. Thank you. I'm fairly talented at making my own fun where it seems to be lacking naturally. Yep, I know. Before anything else, you let Baxter actually come in. He cordially joined you in the family living room. With the greetings and pleasantries all done and an invitation to talk extended, he got right to the point, as you would have expected from him.
I hope I'm not being too forward.
But I would like to spend more time with you. And obviously, this tentative visit would be based on your own schedule. It'd be ghastly if I expected you to drop everything, simply because I've only now made myself available. Taylor Swift? I mean, that's sort of... You know. That's just you having social anxiety. But no, like using a chat, like using a touch screen to order instead of going to the counter, that's whatever. Whenever works best for you, I will accommodate accordingly. It is late today, so I don't expect that, but I am entirely free tomorrow. Sighing, your shoulders slumped and then your head hung forward. Baxter lightly scratched the side of his neck. Sorry, but I'm spending tomorrow afternoon at a family thing. I probably won't be back home until pretty late. But we could do something in the morning? As long as you don't mind it being kind of short. Just 8 people? Indeed. Talking to AI chat is like pressing random numbers for automated help, was what I was saying. Kinda. In Japan, don't you talk to robots? Yes, but Japan has its own culture that still supports people. And Japan's just kind of got like a weird thing. Japan's got some weirdness going on. Touchscreen reads your order back correctly and doesn't mess it up. Like, Japan is just... I don't know, just things that I've heard about Japan, that it's got like some real issues when it comes to mental health. Jujube, you are subscribed, Juju. You are a member. I assume that you probably ended up... I don't know, this might have been a gift membership that you got? I don't know. It's probably a gift membership you received at some point. Unless you are paying for it. I can't really see if a member is gift or paying themselves. Baxter's eyes widened for an inexplicable reason. You thought your suggestion was a good compromise. The look on his face changed. It was strange. There was a problem, certainly, but if he was free and so were you, what could be that much of a roadblock? We can hang out some other day if that's not what you had in mind. His expression shifted again, and not for the better. Whatever caught him off guard in the first place was nothing in comparison. Baxter was getting even more perturbed. And just as quickly, Baxter snapped out of it. He released a steady breath and regained much of his usual relaxed composure with his next inhale.
I apologize.
Forgive me for being distracted. Your idea is perfectly manageable. More than that, in fact. I'd prefer it if we didn't put things off to another day. How about we go to a cafe and get coffee, or tea, or whichever drink you prefer? I've seen some very nice ones when I've been out exploring the area, but I haven't patronized any of them yet. That sounds good. Let's do it. Excellent. Tomorrow morning it is, then. I love you all equally. Trailer. Cut to me earlier. I don't care much for Dandy. Or however that meme goes. It was always going to be a busy day, but at least now tomorrow had an added dash of excitement. The anticipation was mutual, and Baxter's tone sweetened. Use the pizza portal at Little Caesars this week instead of get a membership. Cheating on a code. Not cheating, I'm just hanging out. I love you all equally, Trailer and Killface. I'm not picking favorites. You got all the details squared away. Baxter volunteered to play driver for the short trip, and you planned to drop by his house in the morning, once you'd gotten ready. When that was settled, there was nothing left to do other than to say your goodbyes for the night. Baxter politely dipped his head. Bye. Have a good night. Might have subscribed yourself. Well, I appreciate it, Jujube.
Goodbye for today.
You as well. I'll see you soon, Jamie. Then he was gone. The rest of the night passed pleasantly. Your thoughts wandered all along all the fun paths tomorrow could unfold in. I vibrate between planes. Good day. Good times. Good times, Jujube. The next morning, you were up and out the door like a whirlwind. Your eyes were set on your goal as you went up the hill and across the street to Baxter's condo. Knocking on the door, you tried to guess the cafe Baxter had in mind. He'd mentioned before there were a few that caught his eye, but you weren't sure what that meant exactly. Your growing curiosity wouldn't have to wait much longer. Or maybe it would. As you stood in front of Baxter's shut condo, you gradually realized it was taking quite a while for him to answer the door. Much more than was normal. Blinking, your head swiveled as you double-checked for your own sanity that you had the right house. You did, but Baxter was still nowhere to be seen. You rang the doorbell next. Another couple minutes passed, and finally you began to hear a faint clattering inside the house. The door pulled open a crack. It was barely enough to see Baxter on the other side, wearing a half-lit daze and not his usual outfit, that was for sure. Baxter? Everything all right? He yawned loudly and then sluggishly followed your line of sight to look down at himself. He frowned the second it clicked that he wasn't dressed for the event. You guessed those were his pajamas.
Forgive me.
I deeply apologize, Jamie. I will need an additional moment before we can leave. I'm running late, it seems. And he shut the door. You were left there on his doorstep, entirely at a loss. His bizarre behavior was unexplainable, at least for the second it took for your brain to completely process what had happened. It dawned on you that this was the first time you'd actually seen Baxter before noon, and how that might not be a random coincidence. He wasn't a morning person. Same. Mornings can blow. Suddenly the door flung all the way open, nearly knocking you backwards. Baxter was back, and this time you got a full view. Pajamas! Baxter was indeed wearing only his pajamas. Black and white PJs, of course. Excuse me, that was rather impolite. Got him to contact him? I mean, he's just up the street. He's just a couple doors down, so... You couldn't tell by his tone of voice which incident he was even referring to. Shutting the door in your face? Or the way the situation was dragging on forever? It was hard to know. Can't smoke weed, the vibrations don't agree with me. I'd end up in the nut house. Started your day at 7 p.m. today. Good times. Those are good times, fart. But Baxter moved aside enough that you could pass by. Why don't you come in? Baxter's exhaustion was worrisome, but you shuffled inside anyway. It probably upset him more to leave. You walked through the entryway and into the living room. You paused to take in the space, unable to help yourself. After all those years trying to avoid this condo, you were actually inside. Honestly, you never thought that would happen. Hey, JJ. drinking coffee out of a cowboy mug that has a lasso as a handle. Lasso doesn't seem like the most secure way to hold the cup, but... Hey, Rebecca. But as much as you wanted to explore, there were even more unexpected things taking precedence. Your attention returned to Baxter. He closed the door and followed behind. Baxter pinched the bridge of his nose between his thumb and forefinger as his feet dragged. Please, do take a seat. I'm so sorry for not being prepared. I set an alarm for an hour ago, and I know I heard it go off. Somehow, in a matter of moments, that hour disappeared, and now you're here. And I have little doubt about your punctuality. I never left the cat without food. People making shit up, whatever. That absolutely happens. You know, like, set your alarm. You're like, oh, okay, alarm went off. Alright, time to get up. Oh shit, what time is it? How is it an hour later? Oh. I always made sure the cats were fed. You'd have to... I did have the bathroom in my room, Vanna. Like, I did have the ensuite bathroom. So, like, I didn't really have to leave my room very much. But no, I mean, I would still have to go downstairs to feed myself. So. No, I never stayed in my room for 4 days straight. Well, wet food, dinner, bit of both, Vanna. I tried to do both. Wet food at specific times, and then dry food just always around. Cats jerks, they wouldn't let that happen. They would chew through the door in an hour. Never noticed an ensuite. Yeah, the place I'm in now is an ensuite, but the bathroom is just right across the hall from my room. So, yeah, at the villa, ensuite. Woot woot. Yeah, I will say, like 4 days. When I was like deep in my depression funk, back at like early 2001. Entirely possible I might have stayed in my room for like 4 days straight at that point, or like barely left my room. Because I was barely leaving my bed for like a month. You know, like there was a good few weeks where I barely left my bed, never mind my room. So, I mean, during that period, it's entirely possible I could have forgotten to feed the cats. I mean, you know, Chantal was still living there at the time, but... I am saying that during the time that Chantal was in Kuwait, during the time that Chantal was away, I did feed the cats every day. Usually twice a day. Yeah, I gave them wet food usually twice a day. I gave them wet food. Coming to Toronto for the Trans March. I am not, Kara. Yeah, wet food usually twice a day. I think there might have been a couple of times where I only gave them wet food once in the day, and then obviously, just they always had dry food. Their bowl was always full, always kept full. There were probably times they had to go a few days. There might have been, they might have had to go a few days without treats at some point. Hey, Fallout. Yeah, they might have had to go a few days without treats, and they would certainly treat that like they were being starved. Right? Cats would absolutely, if they don't get the treats they're expecting, they will absolutely act like they are being starved. That is absolutely not something I have any recollection of, Rebecca. Like I said, I mean, there was, early 2001, I did have my period where I was where I just never left the bed. I don't recall Chantal ever leaving for more than, a couple days at a time. But yeah, there was a period where I just could have happened. I don't know because because there was a couple weeks where I just had no awareness of what was going on because I just my depression doesn't want. No, 2021. 2021. Yeah, there was a couple weeks where I had no awareness of what was going on because I was just my depression was it was the worst my depression had ever been. This was early 2021 that I was just I was. I don't believe there was any period where Chantal was away for 4 days. No, I mean... So what happened there, it wasn't directly related to COVID. But I think COVID was sort of indirectly, because what happened is COVID caused problems for a lot of people. COVID left a lot of people sort of out of work. No, this was when I was working for Rogers. So this was when I was doing customer service for Rogers. So COVID left a lot of people sort of out of work, not bringing in the money they normally made, and looking for ways to cut back on their bills. And the options that I had to reduce their bills were extremely limited. So it was just call after call of me telling customers Sorry, nothing I can do to help you in this difficult time you're having where you're struggling to make ends meet. And, more and more and more I had to do that. And it just kind of broke me. Is what it comes down to. It just absolutely broke me having to keep telling customers, nope, I can't help you. So, I hit a point where I was just like, I dreaded. I was like working from home, and like I dreaded just like getting up to go turn on the computer and work. Like I just dreaded working. I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I was staying in bed for days at a time. Yes, COVID still exists. Stupid question. Anyway. Yes. This. Set an alarm, ready to get up, and then realize that an hour has passed and you're now late. That happens a lot. He moved the hand up to rub his forehead with his palm as if to catch the memories lost inside. You didn't rush him, instead settling yourself in a chair. I don't know how this could have happened. It's... Baxter's words became too mumbled and faint to understand. That brought your gaze back to him directly. As a former Rogers employee, the scripts you have to follow are draconian. You're expected to upsell desperate people. Kinda, yeah, and I was in the retention department. Just make it even more fun, I was in retention! And I was still expected to upsell to people. I love telling people no, but I have a 3-year-old. Do I still wear a mask? Yep, whenever I go to a store, whenever I'm out, I do still wear my mask. Whenever I, like, go inside somewhere. Yeah. Baxter's words became too mumbled and faint to understand. That brought your gaze back to him directly. And you got an eyeful of his exposed stomach. Baxter was in the process of taking his shirt off over his head, but in his groggy state, the material had gotten caught in his ears. I mean, kind of feel like enjoy the show. I kind of feel like enjoy the show. Snickered quietly. This was the absolute last thing you were prepared for this morning, but you couldn't hold it against Baxter. He was so tired, and it was funny. Averting your eyes, you tried to find something else to focus on, but it was hard when you also couldn't stop the giggles from coming out. Baxter tugged the collar of his shirt down. What's so amusing over there? Looking at him again only produced more laughter from you. It was a natural response. He followed your line of sight to his wrinkled clothes. Oh, it's me. That's not correct. I'm sorry. Anyone else in the mask when you go up? I don't really notice anybody. I don't really pay that much attention, Rebecca, but I don't think there's many people in masks. Cornwall is a very conservative-leaning city. I'm used to living with dorm mates. They don't care about that sort of behavior. I've lost my manners. I'll go change properly in my room. Well, there's no harm done. I really don't mind. Come on, give me a show. No. He waved his hand, dismissing your notion completely. He sighed deeply, still seeming absent-minded. You're my guest, and I'm being terribly rude. Please, stay here. I'll be back in 2 shakes. And with that, the situation was out of your hands. You watched him fumble his way through the room. Baxter made it upstairs, and the slam of a door sent the house rattling. The following dead silence only lasted a split second. "Sorry." His voice rang out from what you assumed was his bedroom. His next words were even clearer. He must have opened the door again to speak. "I didn't mean to do that at all." "That's okay." "I think I pulled the door too hard." "No problem. That happens." "I swear the noise was completely unintentional." He didn't add anything else after that. You remained where he left you in a rapidly growing state of disbelief. To put it nicely, Baxter was a total mess, and somehow the universe deemed you worthy of having a front row seat. I mean, it is kind of cute that it is kind of cute how completely not together he is in the morning. That was extremely cute. Despite it not being Baxter's ideal part of the day, he was still trying so hard to make it work. That consideration and intent meant a lot. And the bedhead, pajamas, and groggy silliness was an added bonus that you were going to treasure. After a few minutes, the clumsy bumping around upstairs faded. A part of you considered the chances of whether or not he had fallen asleep somewhere, but the sound of careful footsteps soon banished that thought. Baxter returned downstairs, and properly dressed as well. He drifted his fingers along the buttons of his shirt, double-checking that everything was in order.
Hello.
"Here I am. Good morning." You were pleasantly surprised to see him already. Hopefully he was actually doing as well as he was trying to. "Hey, good morning." "I can't emphasize this enough. Thank you so much for your patience. I apologize for that unnecessary bump in our plans." Baxter graciously moved beyond his earlier antics. If you hadn't witnessed it firsthand, you probably wouldn't have believed it even happened. Though, as you observed him more, you noted the signs. He hadn't erased all evidence of a few minutes ago yet, if you knew to look for it. His usually pristine and deliberately put-together outfit was pulled and tucked in the wrong places. There were even wrinkles. Baxter turned his head in an attempt to suppress a yawn, and there was a dull edge to his entire demeanor. He hadn't quite reached his usual razor-sharp wit yet. It was all right. You still quite enjoyed this soft, easy-going state of Baxter. "So you're not a morning person?" "You be correct." He let his gaze fall away somewhere to the side, frowning. "I am the furthest thing from being a morning person these days." "Good to know, Night Owl." But then his smile slipped, and you could see Baxter's guilt surfacing. "I should admit directly that mornings are, as you might have surmised, a challenge. It wasn't always this way." I swear, the older I get, the more the early hours become a chore. I got up at dawn for school for years, but college allowed me to actively avoid morning classes altogether. Now I can't remember the last time I had an occasion to be out before 11 at the earliest. Baxter rubbed the back of his neck. His frustration with himself was palpable. "Seriously, you don't need to feel bad. Some people are built that way." "Bee! I'm built that way." Nevertheless, it's jarring to be entirely lost for a specific chunk of the day. I expected I would have a rough start, but I never thought I'd handle the occasion this poorly. I certainly would have made better choices if I knew this was the sight I'd be showing you. "You got this close from the hamper? Probably." The intensity in his voice gradually lessened until the final part was delivered quietly. He couldn't even look at you as he muttered. But if you're still interested, I would be thrilled to go have our charming cafe breakfast. It would be a shame to miss out on the chance." "Of course I'm interested." A wave of relief smoothed out the worry from his brow. It was sweet, and pulled a quiet chuckle from you. Baxter's feet scuffed over the ground as he followed you out of the condo. He simply shut the front door before walking into the street. Alien tourist. "Thank you. I'm trying. I'm trying to sound like Baxter." You shrugged it off. And while he might have been living in a daze, when Baxter was standing at the driver's side of his car, you could see his focus sharpen. This was a task that neither of you wished him to fail. He unlocked the vehicle and slid inside. You climbed into the other side. Baxter seemed to be in better control of himself by the second. His seatbelt clicked into place with perfect poise. When you were both ready, Baxter promptly brought up the directions to the cafe. Here we are. Sighing contentedly, you leaned in your seat and soaked in the morning sun coming in through the window. You were optimistic that the outing was going to be great. The drive wasn't long at all, and no issues came along. It was smooth sailing. You hopped out, and the scents wafting from the cafe were enough to pull you towards the propped open front door. Once you were inside, the intermingled smells became easier to decipher. Chocolate, cinnamon, bacon and eggs, and, most especially, coffee. I need to take the next room to enjoy this properly. I am best enjoyed on drugs. There was something about that particular brew of coffee that immediately reminded you of your parents. The two of them loved to have long, easy mornings in the kitchen with mugs of coffee between them on the counter. They might be doing that at home that very minute. Before you could tug on that thread of thought further, a waiter passed by you carrying a sliced quiche. Don't know how to open the package, it's fuckery. You breathed deeply, picking up the various ingredients before your eyes could confirm it. It looked impressively made. Baxter led you towards the showcases. There were even added baskets of bread and other treats there. Every inch of space was fully stocked with options. Clearly, coming early had its advantages. Whether you ate anything or not, this sight was delightful. There was a charm to how they presented the fresh pastries. That was the word he'd used when pitching the place. Charming. Baxter was right on the money there. It was a pleasant little cafe with a comfortably quiet atmosphere. Though it was a bit more formal than a typical coffee joint. You couldn't sit anywhere or order at the front. A member of the waitstaff needed to seat and serve you. You found that detail to be a Baxter thing. It was absolutely him to choose a sit-down restaurant even for a casual breakfast. A server came over and gestured you to follow her through the room. She brought you to a shiny two-seater table and passed out the menus. Welcome! I'll bring some water, but if there's anything else you'd like to drink, I can put in the order now. Or you can take some time to think about it. You'd be a lifesaver if you brought me a black coffee. Please. I'd like... a glass of juice. Gotcha, I'll get that right out. Just relax and browse the menu, and you're welcome to take a peek at the front and see what baked goods we have prepared today. She clicked her pen closed and then left you two alone. I don't know why I decided the waitress was a valley girl, but I decided she was a valley girl. Not scary, just on a vibe that is like easy. She clicked her pen closed and then left you two alone. Baxter sunk in his seat, slinging one arm over the back. His eyelids fell heavily closed, but his smile remained serenely in place.
Now.
Please order to your heart's content. Whatever you fancy. But don't be alarmed that I don't have much of an appetite in comparison. Coffee is all I need this morning. I like flavored creamer in my coffee. Cream. Are you sure you don't even want even a little bite to eat? Baxter's expression grew gentler as he silently watched you. When you didn't add anything else, his brows bent.
That's sweet.
You're so considerate, but trust me, I'm certain. I always intended to order a coffee. I've never had much will to eat at this hour of the day. Okay. You nodded. You were still concerned about him, but you decided to drop it. There was no use pushing him over his ideal breakfast. Don't you mean easy like in a bad way? I don't mean easy like in a slutty way, I just... You weren't entirely sure if you were going to order anything yet. It was a deliberation you had with yourself while Baxter took a break. Luckily for you, the cafe's layout was open enough that you could observe the glass case at the front from the comfort of your seat. You passed the time comparing what was printed on the menu to the real-life displays. Soon enough, the waitress was on her way back to your table. She passed out the 2 waters, and then placed a white cup filled with richly colored coffee in front of Baxter, and a glass of juice by you.
Perfect.
Are either of you ready to order? I'm taken care of, thank you. Food and one of those pastries. Everything you'd seen so far smelled delicious, and after reading through the menu, how could you resist getting some goodies to sink your teeth into? The waitress smiled attentively and readied her pen. I'm all ears. Hey, Frogger. I'd like... a yogurt parfait. And I'd like... a piece of cake. Hi, Frogger. You are acknowledged, Frogger. Great choice. That sounds really yummy. I'll get these menus out of your way then, and I'll be back soon with your order. Why is a Valley Girl voice so fun to do? She scooped up the menus and walked away, dropping them off at the front stand before disappearing into the kitchen. Baxter shifted his attention to you.
Lovely.
That sounds like a lovely breakfast. I'm pleased there were a variety of things that piqued your interest. Another long, wide yawn forcefully derailed Baxter's train of thought. He politely tried to shield you from the image by covering his mouth. I do that. Like that. Once he'd wrangled himself back into control, Baxter flashed you a grin, though it quickly lost its playful oomph as his eyes remained extra-lidded. He had something in mind, but he also seemed fairly content to simply gaze at you languidly. Baxter lifted his coffee and pressed the edge of the cup to his lip. He took a slow sip before putting it down. Baxter propped an arm against the table so he could hold his chin up. Normally that would have been a casual gesture, but anyone could tell that he desperately needed the extra help keeping his head upright.
Is that fine?
Before food arrives and steals all your attention away, would it be fine to ask a question? Skinny emo man? Girls love a skinny emo man. Oh, sure, ask away. What exactly is the event you have on the horizon? It's nothing crazy. I'm going to see my aunt and uncle. Actually, do you remember my cousin Lee? She invited us on the boat trip.
Certainly.
I certainly recall. She had a bright personality. Emo is offensive? Really? Yeah, it's her parents. Too bad Lee won't be there this time. She's busy. That... His response was cut off by another yawn, and one that morphed into a wince. Baxter tried to smooth things with a sweet smile.
I'm sorry.
I promise that was not me being bored. He blinked, and it was hilariously obvious that his eyelids didn't easily unstick. You bit down on the inside of your cheek and tried not to laugh. It's all right. You're tired. Exactly. Please, continue. Yeah. Out of my aunt and uncle, it's my uncle who I'm directly related to. He's my mom's younger brother. We all get along. That's the part of my extended family we're closest with. Well, in terms of location. Laughing, you scratched the back of your head while you explained. Baxter nodded along, focusing on the sound of your voice. His smile softened as he grew more animated, speaking about your family. It's not that I don't have a good relationship with everyone on my ma's side, but they mainly live in Hawaii, so it's a lot harder to go see them in person. My grandparents used to be in California when me and Liz were little so they could help out, but that was temporary. And yeah, it's nice having family that we can see more often. Your voice trailed off with fond thoughts about your family, and then your eyes snapped wide open. All Baxter did was ask about your plans for the day, And somehow, you'd ended up rambling about so much more. Oh no, I kind of, went on a whole thing there. Nonsense. I enjoyed listening to everything you shared.
Thank you.
Thank you for telling me about your family. It was lovely to hear about them. Okay, you're welcome. The waitress returned with your order. She placed it carefully on the table. Enjoy! 25, everything I say is probably unintentionally offensive. Used for other cultures as a negative term. I've literally never heard that. The only context I've heard emo in is, you know, the subculture. Of like skinny white boys with a lot of makeup. Like that's the only way. That's the only context I've ever heard emo used. You didn't waste a single second and gave it a taste. It was good. Since you had basically covered everything about what you were doing later, you didn't need to juggle thinking, talking, and eating. Just as Baxter intended. I like the whole ass pajama outfit trope. Like pajamas aren't your worst shirt and zebra shorts. My emo? I am not emo. It was nice to preoccupy yourself with this treat. Baxter, meanwhile, only had his coffee, and he was acutely aware of that difference. Baxter pinched the inside of his lip between his teeth while he tried to search through his foggy thoughts for something to say. He wanted to be good company, but he wasn't sure how to accomplish that. Ah, I know. How about I tell you what happened while I was on my trip? That'd be cool. Let's hear it.
In that case...
Where'd Rebecca go? Who cares? Baxter sat up straighter in his chair and considered how he wanted to begin the story. His focused mindset momentarily overcame the tiredness that clung to him. As you know, I traveled to Northern California, and it was a monumental drive. Several hours of me, myself, and the road. That car was wonderful. It got me there and here again without a single issue, when it had every reason to rebel against all the potholes I accidentally hit. Talked about Phil Hartman. I got a video for Andy Dick, and I learned a lot. Yeah, Andy Dick is... I'll be honest, even on news radio, I never really liked Andy Dick on news radio. I always found him to be kind of annoying on that show. He's got just like... I mean, it's just like the brand of humor that he does. I just find to be just annoying. It's not my type of humor. Then, you know. Finding out that he's a drug addict, that he got Phil Hartman's wife back on drugs. Finding out that he sexually harasses people. Yeah. So, yeah. Baxter paused on that note and took a drink of his coffee. He placed the cup down on the table and winced. It's really abrasive? Yep. It's somewhat silly now that I'm vocalizing it, but I feel a tinge of guilt for all the miles I've managed to put on that vehicle over the course of this vacation. Sighing deeply, Baxter wore a wistful look. You understood the magnitude of his trip. Hopefully his mysterious acquaintance was the laid-back type. Crazy world with bad speak, yep. On a brighter note, the drive was even more scenic than I imagined. It was a shame I couldn't snap a single picture. Still, I'm grateful that I was able to leisurely travel across the state while I was here. Hey, Tanea. I bet. And all that fuss to see some old family friends. Believe it or not, they're actually people my parents have known since well before I was even alive. Wow. Wow, indeed. I can't even imagine knowing someone for that many years. Though, between you and me, I don't have much of a relationship with them myself. Really? But you went completely out of your way to see them. I know. They've always been fond of me, almost as if I was their own nephew. They're more than happy to open their door to me given the chance. This might surprise you, or perhaps not, but I managed to get along famously with an older set.
So?
It was only polite to make a social call while in the relative area. And there was plenty to catch up on and discuss while I was there. We even happened to catch some fantastic shows. It's nice you enjoyed your trip within your trip. Baxter's nose scrunched as he chuckled. He took another quick sip of his drink. I can't agree more. The two of you continued to chat about upcoming plans while finishing your drinks, and also in between several more extended and defiant yawns from Baxter. Eventually, he glanced towards the windows and his brow pinched. He didn't say anything on his own, so you asked, "What's wrong?"
Well...
I'm worried that I might be keeping you too long from your other plans. It's not too late yet. I don't want there to be a yet. Your family's important. Do you want to get going then? Yes, that would be for the best. He turned in his seat until he caught where the waitress had gone. Baxter waved and she returned a minute later. Could we please have the check? I'd like a check for mine too. The waitress nodded and you began fishing out your wallet. Your brain was already running the numbers over how much you were spending this morning and what you were planning on leaving for a tip. You've got it. I'll get that for you right away. As soon as the waitress was out of sight, Baxter let out another yawn, but it morphed into a frustrated groan. I'm getting fairly sick of that. His tone didn't sugarcoat a single feeling. Pouting, Baxter crossed his arms and tightly shut his eyes. It's a sucky experience when you're that exhausted. Baxter only murmured and roughly rubbed the sides of his face. His frustration manifested visibly as a grimace. I can distinctly feel my own eyeballs in my skull due to the strain. His hands dropped onto the table and the glasses rattled softly. That only made his mood worsen. Cafe looking empty. I mean, it's just because they didn't want to draw in a bunch of people. Honey bunny. That's really what it comes down to. This way they can, it's what visual novels do. They'll, come up with a background. They usually won't draw in characters into the backgrounds. That way they can use it as often as they want without needing to edit it. I hate that. I shouldn't have to be so aware of my own presence in this body. Sorry, Baxter. Sighing, you wondered if this morning was an ill-fated sign all along. It is horrible that he felt so uncomfortable, trying to force himself to win a losing battle. You've been more than gracious for sitting through my complaints. I don't mind. It would be better if I could do more. No, you've done more than enough. I shall live through it. You smiled, and Baxter genuinely tried to match it despite how he was feeling. The waitress approached once more with a small black folder and placed it on the center of the tabletop. Can I clear any of this away for you? No rush if you're not ready. Shadow animate characters, so they're just a silhouette suggestion of a person? Yep. Please, take it all. We're about to leave. The waitress got right to work gathering the cups. Baxter, meanwhile, picked up the folder and opened it. After a few moments, the server was off again, and Baxter peeked at you over the top of the folder. Thank you, Jamie. I do appreciate you making time for me at the very last minute, and especially on a day when you were already so busy. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course.
It's always a treat to see you. Baxter's half-lidded gaze lingered contentedly while he reached in his pocket. And then those tired eyes snapped open. He'd reached the alertness he'd been striving for in an instant. My wallet. He stared at you helplessly. Baxter was sober and extremely aware of the reality he found himself in. I didn't bring my wallet. When I got dressed, I did not recall to take my wallet off the nightstand. Aha! That means this will be my treat! You grinned boldly, but your cheer fizzled out when Baxter didn't respond. He continued to stare at the check in horror. Understandably, Baxter was mortified. He threaded his fingers through his hair. I'll quickly run back and get it and return. But then I'd have to abandon you here, and that's not any better. Perhaps they might take an electronic payment I could send through my phone? All you got was a black coffee. I can cover for you. The corner of his mouth twitched, and you read that as a sign that he'd at least heard you. Though you supposed it was only because he had reached a dead end in his own abilities to solve this problem. Baxter pressed his palms against his eyes, and his fingers curled tightly. He released a slow, shaky breath. I'm inclined to doubt it, Honey Bunny. He doesn't really give off any signs of being on the autistic spectrum. He's outgoing. Doesn't really seem to have much issue with emotions. Or with, controlling himself. Cove, I suspect, might be on the spectrum. I don't think it's something that the developers would have talked about. Well, maybe. I don't think it's something that would have been said outright in the game, but I suspect that Cove, maybe. He exhibits some autistic traits. Baxter doesn't really exhibit much in the way of autistic traits. You weren't sure how to help or what to do. You could only watch. He exhaled deeply once more, and this time he lowered his hands, folding them neatly on the table. I would appreciate that greatly. He couldn't quite look at you while he spoke, though the forced politeness in his tone reached you completely. Yeah, don't worry about it. You collected the check he dropped in his panic and slid your card into it. When the waitress swung by, you handed it over. There was no trouble to be found at this table. Thanks a bunch. Just 1 minute. She walked off, and you shifted your attention to Baxter. In that brief period, his shoulders had lost their defeated slump, and he sat stiffly upright instead. He studied your reaction with a delicate smile. Please don't misunderstand. I am entirely fine. The issue is with my behavior towards you. You don't need to force yourself to make me feel better. It was all my mistake. His lips pressed into a fine line, and it was crystal clear that he was preemptively stopping you from further okaying this situation. Your gaze dropped to the table, and the awkwardness was too stifling to do anything else. The way Baxter was beating himself up for the perfectly normal missteps was horrible. You didn't like it at all. There was a reason why people called these kinds of situations accidents, because there was no manipulative or malicious intent. His only crime today was being human, and sleepy. And if being sleepy is a crime, then throw me in the goddamn prison. If being sleepy is a crime, do you think accents are learned and purposeful? Accidentally influenced? A little bit of both, Vanna. Yeah, I think accents are learned. Accents are learned, but I don't necessarily think purposeful. It's just you pick up the accent, you pick up the speech patterns of the people around you, is what happens. And it's not just accents. It's like just word choice. You pick up the speech patterns of people around you. It's why people who live in other countries will gain and lose accents. Anyway, yeah. If being sleepy is a crime, then throw me in a cell, lock the key, and let me fall asleep for a few days. It's my favorite accent. I don't know. The Scottish accent is very fun. The Scottish accent is a fun accent, I find. It would have been great to remind him of all that, but Baxter was far too irked to hear any of it. You wanted to move on, so you bookmarked things there. The outing wrapped up in a haze. The waitress returned your card and wished you both a wonderful day. Then you left. You're all under my tent in the bush. Australian accent? You're good. Baxter managed to muster up a few things to discuss on the car ride home, but the conversation was distant and disjointed from how you both normally clicked. You made it home safely, though not before a silence had time to form. The slamming of his door to exit the vehicle was the first he'd heard from Baxter in a while. The two of you stood on the street, face to face, but the awkwardness from the cafe had also come along for the ride. Oops. And it lingered forebodingly. This wasn't something you wanted to continue between you and him. Neither of you made a move to leave, a promising sign that he was struggling with the same thought. Baxter began sliding his fingers through his hair, but then he paused mid-motion and dug his nails into his scalp. His controlled expression strained.
I'm sorry.
Jamie, this is all my fault. I not only forgot my wallet, but I made things increasingly worse by acting immature about it, undoubtedly making you uncomfortable. Right, Mark? Yep. The Scots love frying things, Vanna. Scotland does have a deep and abiding love of fried food. And, deep fried Mars bars. Definitely something that came out of Scotland. They're definitely associated with Scotland. It may be hard to believe at this point, but I often can deal with unexpected issues as a reasonable adult. Today stung a little more than usual. I'm big enough to admit that. It certainly did not help that all of this was coming on the heels of the already disastrous first impression. I had been hopeful that I could still fix the overall impression by the end. Kid fry candy at a restaurant, and some people did it, but it isn't massively common. Needless to say, I didn't succeed. And I'd completely understand if you were doubting the merit of a friendship with me at this point. I've presented myself terribly to you.
But...
However, if you're willing to, I would like to ask for a second chance. I can take you out for drinks tomorrow night. Or rather, any night you have free. I promise the next one will be better. A dusting of a blush rose in his cheeks while he barreled through everything he needed to say before you could get a single word in. Finally, Baxter paused to breathe. You blinked, trying to absorb the magnitude of everything he'd said. Now that he laid all his cards on the table, there was nothing left to do but anxiously wait. Above all else, he'd wedged open a space for you to talk, and that was a relief. I know my rep. I have one, not saying I'm that memorable, but I know how the trolls come too. I am a troll in a way, but I am high. Yep. I am getting the impression that you're high, Jujube. I had a great time today. I'd love to do something with you again.
Really?
Yeah, why wouldn't I? I know you're embarrassed it happened, but I don't feel the same way. We had fun with a few problems that all worked out. Ah, you're far too kind. His gaze was gentle, if only for a single look. Baxter swiftly resumed his usual grin and confidence.
Very well.
I'll be in touch with a specific time then, and potentially a suggestion for what you might want to wear. Have a lovely rest of your day with your family. Tell your mothers and sister I said hello. I will. Didn't even make my point, but I lost it already. Excellent. See you again soon. He waved goodbye, and earnestly seemed to be in a much better mood than only a few minutes ago. You waved too, even though his turned back couldn't see. Bye. He steadily walked home, and once he was safely inside, you couldn't hold your frown in any longer. All morning, Baxter acted as if he had to be the one who needed to earn approval. To him, you weren't individuals getting to know each other. He was an outsider who had to jump through hoops or be excluded. That was the impression you'd gotten. It was more than upsetting. Maybe he took it that hard because he was so tired. That felt like wishful thinking, but you thought so anyway. It was possible Baxter would be more comfortable after he rested. And if he wasn't, then you hoped that he would allow you to show him that your company didn't have to be like that. The rest of the day was focused on your family, and it overall was a great one. It was nice spending the afternoon with your aunt and uncle, Moms, and Liz. And you remembered to tell them Baxter said hi. You were half asleep when you finally made it home and collapsed onto your bed. Soon, morning had come again. Tell you, no, I do have tonight off. I am back tomorrow. The afternoon that followed moved strangely fast and slow because you knew there was another outing to get drinks with Baxter at the end of it. Exactly as promised, you received a text with the set hour to meet him at his condo. Baxter informed you that it was going to be late when you'd be leaving, so he recommended that you have dinner as usual. Apparently this place did not serve meals, only drinks and appetizers. Interesting. Along with that, Baxter made the eyebrow-raising suggestion that you should wear formal attire. Even more interesting. He included an assurance that he'd be prepared when you were ready to leave. During dinner, you mentioned that you were going out for drinks with Baxter later. Your moms were still commenting on your plans when you left to get ready. Even a few teasing remarks over the dress code floated upstairs with you. When you opened your drawer, your mind was made up. You'd wear something... go formal. It was odd putting on some of your nicer things when you had no clue what you were even dressing up for, but there was also something exciting about having that mystery too. Actually, should I go with formal or grandly formal? Like, Baxter's like, hey, wear something formal. So do I go with just regular formal? Or do I go with fanciest crap I got? What's everyone think? Where are we going? We're going out for drinks with Baxter. Baxter didn't tell us where we're going, but we're going out for drinks. At some place that he thinks, he suggested formal wear. So it seems to be I would guess that it's like a mildly fancy place. Grandly formal, stick out in a good way. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And honestly, like, it's one of those things where it's like... It feels like it'd be funny to do to Baxter, you know? Like, Baxter's probably expecting us to show up in just like a, LBD or something. Yeah, she's probably expecting just the regular... He's probably just expecting, they'll probably show up in a little black dress. Just something... And then I show up in, like, ball gown, Grandly formal it is. You closed the drawer and instead dug into the very back of your closet. You plucked the pieces you almost never wore. Baxter suggested formal. But that was Baxter speaking. Formal to him had to mean something entirely more on the grand scale of fancy. place where they set the drinks on fire? Hope so. Wherever he was taking you, there was little doubt in your mind it would be possible to overdress, even in your nicest things. There were a few minutes left before you had to leave, so you made sure that you had everything you might need while you were out. You ran through the essentials: phone, house keys, money, ID. Corsage education, exactly. As bad as you felt for Baxter, you didn't want to run into a similar problem of forgetting something important. It was a good reminder for both of you to be careful. Indeed, Jujube. Once you knew it was all there, you went downstairs and waved to your moms on the way out of the house. Their goodbyes and well wishes reached you as you locked up. You walked down the street and arrived at Baxter's house. Quite literally seconds after ringing the doorbell, you heard the rattle of the doorknob turning. The door casually opened. Not too fast, not too slow. And there on the threshold was Baxter, though this time he wasn't in his pajamas, but instead a full suit. That was, naturally, also black and white. If someone in a button-down told me formal, I'd dress up. I mean, honestly, like, regular formal, like, just, you probably don't need, you very rarely need to go grand formal. You know, like, little black dress or a suit. Baxter's going to propose. Anyway. Nice suit. That is a nice suit he's got. Yeah, I gotta say, it's a really nice suit. Hello. Thank you for coming. Together, your elegant attire made a perfect match. That meant your remaining concern now was whether or not the location he had in mind would actually make sense for how dolled up you both were. Knowing Baxter, there was at least a 50-50 shot. Handkerchief and Kisu cry. You look incredible, Jamie.
I love it.
I believe both of us will be the ideal guests for this occasion. I can't tell you enough how delighted I am that you're accompanying me tonight. Thank you. Tempted to tease, but I feel like that would just... I feel like this would be mean. I kind of hoped you'd be in pajamas again. His mouth twitched as if he wasn't sure if he wanted to laugh or scowl more. You chose for him by snickering. Well. Nah, that's mean to say. That suit looks very good on you. Baxter smoothed the front of his jacket. He had enough experience to know just how charming he looked in formal attire, and he wore it proudly. But that sight suddenly paled in comparison. He brightened like your compliment was a true badge of honor.
Glad to hear it.
Thank you very much. I'm always thrilled when an opportunity arises to wear it. Now that you'd gotten a good eyeful, you could discern that Baxter was truly himself. The exhaustion and the embarrassment from yesterday's morning adventure were entirely removed from his features. Hey, Bugsy. Ma taught me at a young age that appearances change minds. My grandpa later on showed me confidence rules. Yep. Confidence makes a huge difference. You know, obviously there are some outfits, doesn't matter how confident you are, people are gonna think you look ridiculous. But for the most part, yeah, confidence lets you get away with... Honestly, confidence lets you get away with just about anything. It's nice to see you've gotten some rest. Thanks for noticing. He flicked the stray hair into place and winked. You laughed at his playful display. I'm feeling quite rested this evening, so there shouldn't be any pesky yawning interrupting us.
Now,
Shall we go? This isn't something we'd want to be late for. Lead the way. And so you both climbed into his car, and were off. Baxter drove you out of the neighborhood. Your attention lingered on the starry sky for a moment, able to see a good view of the moon until he took a lazy turn. When you turned back to Baxter, his expression said little. He still offered no obvious hints about your destination. The only thing you could count on was that the place would serve some form of liquid. Probably. Confidence really is key. Which is why I have so little success in anything. I have no confidence, so... What are we doing? Well... He diligently stared at the road, not yet out of the residential streets of Sunset Bird. You caught a glimpse of his excitement as he continued talking. Tried to instill confidence by speaking in the mirror to myself, but it made me sad and think confidence wasn't real. If you recall, I mentioned how we saw some shows while on my trip within a trip. You could call that my inspiration. Once you graciously accepted my invitation, I began the endeavor to search for a particular performance we could see together.
to be honest,
I had high hopes for what I could manage, even with such short notice, and happily, I doubt you shall be disappointed. He let his words settle, drumming up the anticipation. Coincidentally, the car rolled to a stop at a light. He turned to you with a proud grin. Tonight, we'll be seeing a live show featuring a comedy of errors-style romance. Ooh. His foot pressed on the gas, and he turned on the main road. A show? It wasn't anything you were expecting, but then again, it was Baxter. You were getting the impression he liked to surprise you. But, wait, didn't you invite me for drinks? Does drinking a soda or something in a theater count as getting drinks? You understood that Baxter was striving for a mystery here, but still. I don't think he means movie theater. I am very pleased you asked. Baxter's smile grew. He had expected your reaction. They do serve drinks. An excellent selection from what I found. And it will only be drinks. There's no food on the menu. He shrugged his shoulders, not particularly finding that to be a loss. You were glad you weren't hungry. However, as promised, the drinks are crucial to the experience. You see, this isn't at some grand arena. You'll find tonight's entertainment is at the spectacularly immersive setting of a jazz bar. All patrons will witness the story unfold in that very room. Ooh, sounds fancy. His voice lowered, theatrically so, fitting for the topic of conversation.
does that sound alright?
Also, if you'd like, it's possible for the actors to interact with you directly. How very Baxter Ward of you.
Oh?
Jamie, are you accusing me of being predictable? What can I say? You have a brand. You cackled at his expression. It cycled between offended cat and amused spy, trying but failing to contain his feelings. I like that description. While you hadn't expected this specifically, an interactive show at a jazz bar fit what you had learned of his tastes. You were excited to experience what would come next, content to keep seeing more Baxter-style activities. Baxter drove into the heart of the city, passing by the twinkling lights of the urban night until he pulled into a public parking lot. He switched his phone's map app to walking mode. It's an 8-minute stroll from here. You shrugged, not needing to point out that walking tended to be your main form of transportation anyways. Dwelling makes you more negative. Being a realist is more positive in my experience. Like, I feel good is probably for a reason. I dwell. Both of you exited the car, and Baxter made a note of where exactly he was leaving it. Luckily, the lot was well lit and located in a busy area. It'd be hard to miss. He led you across the road and then followed the sidewalk until his phone proclaimed you had reached the correct building. Baxter got the door for you. Thanks. Of course. Inside, he switched his phone off of the map, but continued tapping away at it. Now, where is it? He huffed as he scrolled the screen. You could immediately tell when he found what he was looking for from his reaction. He'd finally relaxed into his normal state of friendly nonchalance. Curious, you poked your head closer to read what it was. It made sense when you saw it was digital confirmation of his purchased tickets. In front of you was a small line where a man would check tickets before waving people onward. Baxter slipped into the back, and he waited until it'd be needed. I'm glad we arrived on time. Missing the show is likely the only chance of this event going awry. We'd make it work even if we were late. The other guests in line were dressed to the nines. Some were even in vintage clothes. Baxter's previous advice was correct. Hey, wow. Apparently grandly formal was actually not overdressed. I was expecting, you know what? He wants me to dress fancy, I'm gonna overdress. But nope. The wait wasn't too long. After chatting with Baxter for a moment, it was his turn to show his digital tickets. The usher was young, probably only a few years older than you. The bags around his eyes spoke to the fact that this was nowhere near the start of his day. These are for you and your friend, right? You nodded and took a step next to Baxter, making it clear that you were here together. Cool. Thanks for coming in. For some reason, I gave this young man the voice of, like, a 40-something dock worker. I gave this young usher the voice of a 40-something dock worker. We are thankful for you having us. Baxter shoved his phone into his pocket for good once he got approval. He inspected the two of you and tilted his head to the side. Here's some ground rules before you enter the show. Everyone gets them. He began explaining the guidelines, a succinct list that he'd obviously said hundreds of times before. For the most part, the rules wanted you to act as a polite human being. You could do that. Last, if you want to actually participate in the show, you can take one of these necklaces. He pointed out a box full of glowing jewel necklaces. Each was gaudy enough that anyone wearing one would be noticeable in a crowd. Hey, Jordan! Love the usher's voice, yep. Wearing one of these beauties means that you're a part of the same world as the actors are. No necklace, no participation. The actors will treat you like an invisible audience member. You can still speak out if you're suddenly inspired, but nobody's going to put focus directly on you. So, any takers?
My pleasure.
Wow. That's not a voice I'm going to be doing ever again. Yeah, I gotta say, that's not a voice that I'm likely to be doing again. Wow. That hurt. Baxter volunteered immediately, and the usher fished a necklace from the box. I'd like one too. The usher pulled out a second necklace and handed them out with an encouraging expression. Enjoy the show. You were waved off and allowed to enter into the showroom, past heavy double doors. Wow, my throat's gonna hurt for a while. Yeah, my throat's gonna hurt for a good little while, I think, after doing that voice. The showroom was a sight to behold. From floor to ceiling, it was lit up, yet none of that was bright enough to be blinding. The bar was full of expensive bottles and gilded engravings. The back had a pit for musicians, large enough for a full band to play. The instruments were already set up. You were taken to the bar and seated at the two empty stools at the end. The booths along the wall were already filled with groups of other guests, laughing and clinking glasses. They had a full house. This was a popular event. Maybe a bigger deal than what Baxter had presented it as. The ages varied. Some of the crowd was made up of fresh-faced 20-somethings, while others were silver-haired elders. You may have been the youngest in the room. Yes, it is Orange Crush. I prefer the cream soda, but that doesn't come in... Can't get, like, 6-packs of bottles of cream soda at the grocery store. And almost everyone was dressed up. Sequin dresses, fitted suits, and expensive jewelry as far as the eye could see. No broad generalization to be made about the kind of people who would watch a show at a jazz club, other than most of them knew how to dress. No, honey bunny. You can't drink it through the computer screen. Most backwash. The few exceptions in casual clothes stuck out between all the elaborate, well-coiffed looks. Coiffed. I like that word. That second usher bowed and left you alone, just for a bartender to appear out of nowhere and pick it right up where they left off. He passed each of you a drink menu, smooth and practiced. Nice to see you tonight. Just let me know when you're ready to order. God, that was terrible. I was going for like 1920s voice, but that was terrible. Of course. The bartender inclined his head cordially, and then busied himself with polishing a glass with a white cloth. Rose follow-up game? Yeah, I do need to get back to that. I do need to get back to that game. Once I finish with Our Life, I will get back to Don't Take It Personally. The jazz bar took the immersion seriously. Even the guy serving drinks had the proper aesthetic for the world this show took place in. He wore subtle eyeliner, and there was something about how he carried himself that made him seem like he'd wandered off a movie set, especially with highly coordinated, shabby clothes for a uniform. You shared a look with Baxter before examining the menu. From first glance, it was impressive. In total, it held 5 pages of drinks, each with detailed descriptions, and some even had photos. You turned to the last section, entirely for non-alcoholic drinks. You read the blurbs, enjoying both the descriptiveness and the sense of humor. A few minutes later, a waiter in a full suit turned up. His tie was a muted maroon, and the only thing separating him from his clients was his pad for taking orders. You wondered why he approached you rather than leaving it to the bartender. Maybe because he was so busy? No erotic scenes now. Welcome to our show. Can I get you anything, or do you need some more time? Baxter leaned forward in his chair, no hesitation. I would like a baby Bellini, please. Baxter passed the menu back. The waiter took it with a polite nod, then turned to you. You glanced over your options with one final read-through, and then said you would like... Maybe an elderflower cordial? That sounds fancy. Whiskey sour mocktail? Seems kind of jazzy. Didn't ask back. Well, non-alcoholic drinks, honey bunny. I had fried chicken from the grocery store. So yeah, like, me and Baxter are getting non-alcoholic drinks since we're underage. Elderflower cordial. I don't even know what the hell that is. You handed your menu over and the waiter put it with Baxter's. He inclined his head politely one more time. Thank you, esteemed guests. I'll return shortly. The waiter sauntered off and vanished through a side door away from the bar. Baxter's fingertips tapped the counter rhythmically. The soft sounds faded into a din around you. He met your inquisitive glance with confidence.
Not bad.
I knew what I wanted as soon as I saw that name. I firmly appreciate sparkling drinks, as well as peaches. With a wicked smirk, his voice lowered to a husky rumble. I would prefer it without the baby, however. Same here. I'll just snicker. You snickered. It's only the truth. In the distance, the musicians filtered onto the stage from backstage. The sounds of tuning strings took over the soundscape as they prepared for the big event.
Exciting.
The action approaches. There were still a few minutes before he thought the production was scheduled to start. The air was full of anticipation, but still relaxed. The two of you chatted over your respective jazz music experience until the waiter arrived with the drinks. The waiter carried a silver platter with a stiff formality. He passed out the glasses, not even leaving fingerprints due to his white gloves. Curiously, neither drink had been filled at the bar you were sitting at. He placed your elderflower cordial on the counter in front of you, before setting down Baxter's Baby Bellini. Baby Bellini. Thanks. Thank you so much. Gently, Baxter lifted his drink to his lip and sipped at the fruity beverage. He appeared as the very picture of sophistication, with a stem glass in hand and a distant, unreachable gaze. Sitting there with him, everything suddenly hit you. His formal clothes, his fancy drink, the glamorous setting, and his dazzling smile all came together. He had pulled out all the stops for this adventure. It felt like whiplash compared to what had happened with the far simpler, much more normal cafe trip. It had to be intentional. You were certain that this sparkling glitz was his goal. He practically said it out loud with his original invitation. You were never going to underestimate him whenever he got an opportunity to prepare. You picked up your own drink and sampled the refreshment. It was delicious and had a pleasant consistency. After a flicker of lights and an electric moment of silence, you heard the sounds of a keyboard. The crowd hushed, waiting on bated breath, and the rest of the band kicked in. A saxophone cut into the song before being backed by a chorus of trumpets. A bass player strummed along while the drummer kept the time. Everyone around you straightened, on the lookout for something. Nobody was sure what, but they'd know when they saw it. Excuse me. Gas. Wow. A lot of gas, too much soda. Plus the fried chicken from earlier. The double doors at the front opened, and all eyes were on a pair as they entered. The leader strode in with her heels clicking against the glowing walkway. Her form-fitting evening gown sparkled in the dazzling lights. She strutted to the center of the room, a grimace on her red-painted lips. Behind her, another actor casually followed. They easily could have been passed over, especially with many of the guests around them dressed far more formally. This character was plain in appearance, especially compared to the glitter of the other. They took quicker steps and reached out. Both of the characters came to an abrupt stop at the center of the room. The glamorous one spoke loudly, letting her words carry over the band. My darling friend, you know I don't have time for this. I have to prepare for the show and must rest my voice. How else will I manage to sing? Or I should give her a different voice. My darling friend. That's that's probably not the right voice to use, right? Hey, California Milk.
My darling friend, you know I don't have time for this. I have to prepare for the show and must rest my voice. How else will I manage to sing?
Yeah, I don't think I'll keep that voice up. The singer sidestepped away from her friend, greatening the space between them.
I do not want to discuss this.
The friend shrunk away, but refused to back down. There was fight in the way they stood. The singer sighed. She crossed her arms, her frustration towards the topic making her next words bitter.
It is more than enough that my parents and his parents keep bothering me. You don't need to add to that number, my dear.
I can't leave it alone, not when you're making such a mistake. The singer put her hand up, dismissing her friend. Her movements were as sharp as her stilettos.
I repeat, I don't have time for this. I am going to my dressing room.
She swept across the room and then glanced at your direction, before quickly looking away. She exited through a door near the band. You were struck by her last expression. Was that sorrow? Longing? Either way, you had gathered the situation. The two were acquainted, and the diva was a performer at the venue. Her friend wasn't. They had come to offer unwanted, but likely needed, advice. The music slowed down, suddenly somber after the frenetic energy of the singer's outburst. Her friend hadn't moved. They hugged their arms around themselves and slumped into feet. You were so focused on them that when a voice came right from behind, you almost fell out of your stool. It's like talking to a brick wall, isn't it? You craned your head over to the bartender. He was the same man who had passed you the drink menu. He was still at work polishing a glass. He was part of the bit all along. That probably wasn't even a real bar. Yet again, their commitment to realism surprised you. The friend took a deep breath before rushing over to the counter. Now that they were closer, you could tell their clenched hands were shaking. They directed a scowl at the bartender in full force. You need to talk to her. Unlike when they had spoken to the singer, these words were bitten out. They weren't as close to the bartender, and not willing to allow him the same niceties afforded to their friend. The bartender scoffed in their face. He wasn't any fonder of them, but he was trying to retain an ounce of professional decorum. Why would I? I've got no attachment to that lady. None of the crowd was buying it. You heard unconvinced snorts throughout the room. And she acted like I wasn't even here, besides. She wants a stage, and that's it. All I'm good for is watching her, same as everyone else in the world. He gripped the glass tightly. You could faintly hear the polishing cloth squeak against it. She's not interested in my words, just as she told you. There's no time for that. The friend objected harshly, pointing a finger into the bartender's face. They weren't letting him get away with such a falsehood. She can't admit it because you won't admit it. You're making me laugh, kid. The only folks who want us together are you and our parents. He shooed the friend away by flinging his hand through the air. He had the audience captivated, half of them flinching from the gesture. I'm working. Don't block the bar. The friend tossed their hair at him before they skulked away. They waved at a booth of necklace-wearing guests and then slid onto the edge of the cushion. They rolled their eyes and their entire head along with it, intentionally exaggerating, and their new tablemate snickered. I don't know how I put up with either of them. You were starting to get the feel for the show. All the actors' behaviors were turned up to 11 for the sake of comedy. And the heart of the story was clear. The venue's singer and its bartender were in love, but wouldn't admit it due to the outside pressure and feared that the other didn't feel the same. A clattering sound brought your attention back to the bartender. He put the glass he had been polishing away. With his hands free, he idly glanced around for his next task. He settled on you and Baxter. His gaze dropped to your necklaces, and he gave you a professional smile. You were both in the story world. Can I get either of you anything? Refills, a new drink. On the house. Consider an apology for all the ruckus. He leaned over the counter and nodded pointedly at the friend. They blocked their face with their hand and sunk into the booth, trying to escape the stare. One of the guests at their table happened to have a paper fan and held it out to them. They gratefully took it and hid behind it instead. The bartender shook his head, fed up. Baxter, meanwhile, grinned.
Gladly.
That would be delightful. I could use another baby Bellini. Of course, sir. Even while the picture of poise and polite manners, Baxter gave the air of being quite smug over the formal address. The bartender shifted closer to you. You could now smell his spicy cologne. And you? Let me think. Not wanting to hold the show up for long, you asked the bartender for... Martini? We're at a jazz bar, right? Martini. Let's go with the fruit only martini this time. Got it. The bartender looked around the shelves of the fake bar, but scratched his head. Oh darn, I'm missing something. I always tell the owner he needs to keep this place better stocked. He grumbled a little more, earnest complaints. Not one to give up, he thought about his options. The crowd tittered with amusement as the friend peeked out with a flush on their cheeks from the other side of the room. If I'm right, there's some in the back. I'll return with your drink soon. Of course, there's no need to hurry. I appreciate it. Baxter lifted his existing baby Bellini with the drama of a supervillain. You wondered if he was being unaware or trying to put on a good show. The bartender threw his cleaning cloth over his shoulder and briskly abandoned his station. He disappeared through a curtained door beside the bar. You guessed that the real drink station was through there. You'd noticed the actual waiter bounce from table to table fulfilling orders, even during the performance. It made sense to keep the supplies somewhere off stage so that the bar could keep putting out drinks, no matter what was happening with the story. Fruit only sounds like no drink. I assume that it's made with like fruit juice and stuff like that. Without the bartender, you and Baxter had to reorient yourselves as to where the action went. Most of the crowd's eyes were away from the tables. The friend character had scrambled out of the booth and paced along the length of the room. They were still troubled and stopped just short of biting their nails. Just as they clasped their hands together, the singer made her reappearance. Music swelled as she sashayed out of her dressing room, once more the center of attention. Her presence spellbound the crowd, instantly taking focus. Ah! The friend cautiously crept over to her, stepping around the tables between them. Feeling refreshed? Of course, darling, I'm a professional. Darling. Of course, darling. Speaking of professionalism, why didn't you say hi to the bartender earlier? He is here, you know. The singer scoffed, echoing the exact same cadence the bartender had before. They were a perfect match of stubbornness. He doesn't like me. He made it very clear. He told his parents as much. He told my parents. She struck a defiant pose, sounding utterly disgusted. Who does that? What a cad! Her friend scratched the back of their head. Their face twisted comedically as they chose their words with care. Didn't you tell his parents that you did not like him when they suggested it? I also recall when your parents accused you of being attached to him, you denied it. Vehemently. With him in the room. But she's a woman. She's allowed. She's expected to be mercurial. The singer huffed, but didn't deny the events. She and the bartender's relationship was messy. And isn't it true that you do like our illustrious bartender? If your foolish parents hadn't meddled, you would be all over each other by now. Ha! The singer let out a deliberate, prideful laugh. It was dark and barely concealing very real hurt. Do not even pretend. He doesn't care for me, and I don't care for him. She cast her gaze over the pockets of attendees gathered around her, and spread her arms wide. I bet everyone in this room heard him bad-mouthing me as soon as I left. Didn't you? He said you were like a brick wall. A brick wall? She placed a hand on her chest and leaned back. Around her, people nodded and confirmed her words. Of course he'd sink so low. When the room finally settled and the singer had passed along a few more barbs about the bartender, the friend slung an arm around her. Mercurial. Sorry, Vanna. I didn't want to... I don't want to confuse people. It basically just means kind of like quick to change emotions. So running hot and cold. Can't you please hear me out? The singer groaned and shrugged out of her friend's embrace. She backed up with a frown. I need a drink. She spun to face the bar before thinking better of it. Apparently, she didn't need a drink that badly. Not here, of course. I have standards. The sole of her shoe tapped on the floor. She needed action to deal with all that restless energy. I believe this counts as an emergency. Please hold. I need to fetch my crisis bottle from my purse. She stuck her nose high in the air and swanned off to her dressing room once more. Her friend stood alone in the center of the room. The decrescendo of the music made the room quiet. Does mean unpredictable? Yep. Exactly. And women are expected to be that, right? Especially in Golden Age? Back in the Jazz Age, yeah, women were expected to be unpredictable. Or at least, women like her were expected to be unpredictable. In the distance, a door slammed. The diva reached her room. Her abandoned friend visibly winced at the anger of the noise. They closed their eyes and mentally counted to 10. Slowly, their stance unwound as they forced themselves to relax. They glanced furtively to the left and then to the right. Okay! The last actor left spoke to the entire room, projecting their voice loudly. While they're gone, does anyone have any ideas to get those two to admit their actual feelings? It has been weeks of me putting up with their arguments. Bombastic side-eye. I'm sorry to say it, but I'm plumb out of ideas. People began to shout things out or whisper amongst groups. The friend listened attentively as if one suggestion might hold the key to their very survival. Not all of the ideas were positive, or even workable plans. Just give up. I'm too stubborn for that. They aren't getting out of this that easily. Lock them in the back room together until they confess. This is California, but somehow a redneck just managed to get into a jazz bar and get into a fancy jazz bar in Southern California. I don't care if it doesn't make sense. My voices. I just wanted to do a redneck accent. I tried that last week. My friend knows how to pick the lock.
making the bartender jealous. Set her up with someone else.
I'll do it! Wait. Aha! The friend spied a vase full of flowers on a table near the back. They scrambled to collect them into a bouquet. These should work. The flowers can be given to our singer in celebration to her performance. If she thinks they're from the bartender, maybe... This new electric smile on their face contrasted their previous expression. For a moment, though, they faltered. But I can't give these to her. She'll know immediately that they weren't from the bartender. Would anyone else be willing to help out? I know those two aren't giving the best impression, but when they aren't trying to prove each other wrong, they're very cute together. They searched through the crowd, brow furrowed. Please. I'll do it! Your voice rang through the room, and someone started clapping. It was Baxter. Thank you! They bounded towards you and placed the bouquet in your hands. Their sincere gratitude caught you by surprise. You are a hero, I swear! Anyways, here's the plan. Although their tone was hushed as you'd be when sharing a secret, their pitch carried throughout the space. They were a talented actor, especially without any microphone to aid them. I'll go get her. You need to call her over and pretend the bartender got those flowers for her, but was too shy to hand them over directly. Count on me. The friend gave a thumbs up and scampered off to where the singer had left. Baxter inspected the flowers held in your hands. He approved of the bouquet. It would make for a nice gift, circumstances aside. A familiar smirk appeared on his lips. He delicately stroked a petal with the back of a knuckle. His voice was low and in your ear.
You know.
This is unlikely to work, but I do admire the friend's effort. I don't even like to shout out bingo. Oh, shush, you snickered. You affectionately tried to hush Baxter. His grin only grew. I think much of the crowd is skeptical. That's part of the fun. The door to the singer's dressing room swung open, and the friend pulled the singer back into the main room. Their arms were locked together, but the singer was dragging her very tall high heels all the way. In one manicured hand was a tiny bottle, no doubt the aforementioned emergency alcohol. It was already half gone. It's not good to stay holed up by yourself all the time. You don't need to hide from everyone. I'm not hiding. I am simply very busy. Uh-huh. Since they weren't a fool, like the parents, the friend didn't buy that at all. Once the friend reached the center of the room, they released the singer. She rolled her shoulder back, still affronted by the rough treatment. Showtime. Hey, excuse me. I need to give you something. The singer snapped her head towards the bar and narrowed her focus down on you. Her dress swished as she approached. You held out the bouquet. Her suspicious acknowledgement gave you pause. Where did these come from? Tempting. Tempting. I'm trying to hit on you. Lady. Let's see what happens. I'll play along. I do like that they play along. Singer winked and took a step closer, cocking her hip. I'll go with the real one. I'll play along with the play. The bartender left them for you. Miss Starlight gasped and pressed both hands to her chest. She squinted hard at the flowers as if it was a nest of snakes. She unscrewed the cap of her small bottle and tipped it between her pursed lips. She chugged the remaining liquid down. That got a huge laugh from the audience. She slammed her empty bottle down on the bar's counter and gasped for air with a frightening glare. But, gently and slowly, ever so slowly, she reached out. Her fingertips touched a single flower stem. She paused, then finished the movement and wrapped her digits around it. You stayed immobilized, as if she were a butterfly and any movement would send her fluttering off. Without warning, there came a shout from the far end of the bar. Got your drinks right here! Every head turned to see the bartender making his reappearance, a tray of drinks balanced on his right arm. Sorry for the wait, just had to... He froze mid-sentence, staring at the scene he'd returned to witness. The singer, standing next to you, being offered a bouquet, a single flower clutched in her hand. It was deathly quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the band had stopped playing. Until... Ah! Suddenly, the singer let out a mortified shriek. She flung the proffered flower and bolted, beating a frantic, desperate escape. She careened around the corner, and then... Slam! The deafening sound of a door being rammed shut. Another awful silence formed. Having remained frozen when the singer fled, the bartender's attention returned to where you and Baxter were at the bar. His eyes were drilling holes into you, his glare darting between your face and the remains of the bouquet still in your grip. He'd caught you red-handed. Literally, on account of the roses. Stirring the pot, yep. It was unspeakably awkward. Even though your brain was screaming, it's not real, you couldn't help but be swept up in the overwhelming sense of unease filling the room. Slowly, the bartender marched over to the counter, his footsteps weighty and full of intent. He firmly set down the tray of drinks. The glasses rattled angrily, but not a drop was spilled. Good on him! Then he cocked his hat and folded his muscular arms, striking a pose which felt almost threatening and bristled with suspicion. Well now, I see how it is! He flickered a finger up and down, sizing you up with it. So this coal-headed chump is who I'm losing to? Really? Hey? The rather silly epithet got a fair number of titters from the audience, but the bartender wasn't laughing. He made a bitter sound at the back of his throat and shook his head. He muttered angrily under his breath. I should have known. Wait! A cry came from the other side of the room. The mutual friend, face distraught, was bustling their way over, limbs flapping with panic. I can explain. It's all a misunderstanding. What I'm trying to say is... Stumbling over their own words, the friend attempted to lay out the situation. The flowers were all part of a plan to get the singer to admit to her own feelings. Why'd she run away? Because she's secretly in love with the bartender, but doesn't want to admit it. As the friend nervously rambled, you found yourself practically throwing the bouquet down on the counter in front of you, like it was a hot potato, pulling up your arms in a non-threatening gesture. At first, you weren't convinced it would work. The bartender's expression was thunderous as a summer rain cloud. His brows were set in a 90-degree angle, stern as steel. But as some of the other patrons began to chime in with words of confirmation, his dark countenance began to clear. A number of emotions melted into each other on his face. Anger became confusion, confusion became understanding, and understanding became acceptance. He let out a long, tired sigh and unfolded his arms. Okay, I hear ya. You're only trying to help. I'm sorry. He directed this apology at you. I shouldn't have gotten angry. There's nothing wrong with your hair, don't worry. I saw you holding those flowers and lost my cool. He chuckled bleakly. That's on me. I'm the problem here. It's that song, Hi, It's Me, I'm the Problem. I thought she thought he was actually ugly. Oh. At this, he hung his head and slouched where he stood. I can't believe she'd run away like that, screaming as if she'd seen a ghost. Like I was the worst thing in the world. Is it really that awful being around me? Am I really that bad? His voice was thick with emotion, pain behind every word. There was barely a dry eye in the whole building. A chorus of sympathy rose up from the people around you, sounds of comfort and encouragement in equal measure. The tender walked behind his bar and came to rest his palms flat on the counter, his thick arms spread wide. I wish I knew what to do, you know? If only there were something. Anything! It was a frank admission laden heavy with resignation. He bowed his head again and was silent. There was a pointed pause. Into it, you heard Baxter gently clear his throat.
Honestly.
If you'll permit me to say, it can be hard to know what to do in these kinds of situations. But the important thing is that it's making you unhappy. Once you realize that, it should at least be obvious what not to continue doing. Dancing around your feelings like this will only lead further and further from what you want. So why stick to the same old tune? The bartender gradually lifted his face to peer up at Baxter with an inscrutable expression. If you like the charming singer, then what could you ever have to gain by insisting otherwise? You don't need to propose or anything equally drastic, but why push her away when all you want is to get closer? His voice gained a faint lilting cadence, almost like he was a singer too, before it tapered away to nothing. On the countertop, you saw the bartender clench a fist. Ha! You got me pegged. You and everyone else in the joint. So I like her already. What good is that? She thinks I'm a joke. She wouldn't be seen dead with someone like me. We all know that too. You saw what just happened. Am I supposed to make myself look like an idiot? Waltz on over and tell her we should be pals? I'd be straight up begging to be laughed at. I feel like my bartender voice is getting better. I feel like my jazz age voice is getting a little bit better. I couldn't take it. Not from her. Yeah, honey buddy, that part happens at the adults only version of the show. It's always hard to put yourself out there, but isn't it better than the alternative? One hand came up to scratch the nape of his neck in a universal gesture of awkwardness. I guess you got a point there.
I get it.
I understand the concern. You needn't go any further than you're able. The key is that you step forward in the first place, or at least resist the urge to continue moving backwards. When the time comes, don't pull away. You'll only regret it later. The bartender rested one arm across the counter, easing into a stance that was more casual. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. His body language was loosening up. You gathered that he was mulling over what had been said, taking it all in. After a short while, he cracked a cautious grin. You know, it's usually other people who want me to listen to their problems. And by listening, I mean I just help them pick a poison. You know, blunt the edges when nothing else can. Hey, no name. Never thought I'd be on the receiving end, though. He rapped a knuckle on the countertop and straightened up suddenly. Ah, shoot! I forgot the ice with your drinks. I'm being real sloppy tonight, letting personal stuff get in the way of business. Sorry about that. He began to walk towards the heavy curtain, his black shoes echoing loudly on the floor. Let me go take care of that, and maybe cool myself off for a sec while I'm at it. With a click of his heels and a swish of the curtain, he was gone. Now what became the unspoken consensus of the audience? An answer came shortly. Psst! It was in the form of a loud hiss from the other side of the room, from behind the corner where the singer had vanished. Your focus swung back to see the lady in question poking her head out, shy as a dormouse. She cupped her fingers around her mouth, keeping to a stage whisper. Is he gone? Various assenting voices chimed in. Baxter flashed her a quick thumbs up. Seeing that the coast was clear, the singer's head vanished for a brief instant, before reappearing, the rest of her following along with it. She swanned her way into the main area, oozing feigned confidence. All the terror of her departure had gone, hastily pasted over as though nothing had happened. She brought up a hand to shade her eyes, casting a look around the room. Her immaculately lipsticked lips parted. Has my dear, delightful, meddlesome friend decided to finally beat it too? Not yet! The friend's voice called out from somewhere behind you. While everyone's attention had been elsewhere, they had managed to collect the discarded bouquet. In their hand was the lone flower the singer herself had pitched. They held it out to her. I'm sorry. About the flowers, I lied. They weren't from him. They never were to begin with. The singer clapped over her mouth in shock. What? You tricked me! Her cry projected clear as a bell, ringing with hurt and betrayal. Her pristine face was crumpled in a furious scowl, directed first at the friend and then everyone else in the room. And you were all in on it! The friend darted to her side in an effort to placate, babbling apologies over and over with a mollifying tone. I know. I'm a terrible friend and I shouldn't have done it. Finally, something we can agree on. Fine, I deserve that. But just hear me out, okay? Even though they weren't from him, there's nothing stopping you from flipping this on its head. I'm not sure I like where this is going. I'm a singer, not an acrobat. It's easy. When he comes back, why don't you give the flowers to him? The singer stared blankly for a few seconds, then tossed her head back and bellowed with laughter. Her once lyrical voice was now cold and callous in timbre. Oh, my darling friend, you should really consider joining this circus. I've never heard something so ludicrous. This is serious. I just know it'll work, believe me. I'll be rooting for you. And not only me! You all think so too, right, gang? At their prompting, the room was filled with shouts of agreement. Yeah! We'll be right behind you!
It's okay, don't be afraid!
What have you got to lose? The comments came bright and fast. More people pitched in with remarks about what had happened while the singer was gone. Others simply nodded along. Though she'd readily dismissed her friend's suggestion, the audience's reaction seemed to be more convincing. She stood in the middle of the flurry of sound, head cocked, listening intently. At that very moment, there was a shuffling from behind the curtained entrance. The fabric parted to reveal the bartender, carrying a palm-sized metal bowl piled high with ice. For the second time this evening, everyone froze in place. The singer slowly rotated on her heels to face him. His eyes were wide with surprise. Suddenly she stumbled forward. The mutual friend had given her a nudge, knocking her off balance and towards the bartender. She wheeled around to glare at them before snatching the single flower her friend still held and about-facing once more. She laughed a thin, nervous laugh and took one small step closer. A wide expanse separated them. Her footfalls echoed. 1 step, 2 steps. Then she halted, too afraid to continue. She wavered, on the brink of turning back. All at once the crowd made good on their promise. Hollers of encouragement came from the booths behind her. Whoops and cheers and whistles of "Don't give up now!" Come on, girl, I believe in you! Once again, the singer crept across the room as though expecting to be attacked at any moment. The bartender was a statue, watching motionless. Inch by inch, the distance closed. When only a few feet remained to separate them, the singer paused. She cast an anxious look from her target to where you and Baxter were sitting. At your side, Baxter smiled and inclined his head in a nod. You followed suit, giving her a cool thumbs up. Nearly there! With the poise and slowness of a puppet yanked on strings, she extended her arm. The flower gleamed in the dim light of the bar, a flush of red, hanging in the air between them. The bloom was fragile, frail, vulnerable, like a naked, helpless heart offered up in prayer. Everyone in the room held their breath. The two held each other's gaze, neither speaking a word. He knew, and she knew. This time, it was real. The bartender silently placed the bowl of ice down the bar. A moment of choice. A crossroads. Then he walked over and stretched out his fingers. He caressed the petals of the single rose, light as a feather. And then, He placed his fingers over hers and gently lifted the flower free. He had accepted. The response was immediate. The space exploded with applause, cries of delight coming from all and sundry. The friend jumped up and down on the spot, suppressing a squeal. High fives were exchanged. There were wolf whistles and roars of approval. Baxter and you shared a look of silent satisfaction. Amid the jubilation, the bartender returned to the counter to retrieve the bowl of ice. Maybe it was a metaphor. The winter cold slopped for the first blooms of spring. He hastened over to you and dropped a handful of cold, possibly metaphors, in yours and Baxter's glasses. He parted again with a wink. After that first climactic moment, the remainder of the story barreled ahead. No sooner had the lovers begun to open up to one another than further complications reared their heads. First came the parents, who had always claimed the two were fated. They were keen to seal the match and win the satisfaction of lording it over everyone. Nobody could bear the thought of granting them the satisfaction, and so began the elaborate schemes to keep the two families out of the loop. Tragedy devolved into farce. At every stop, the audience had a part to play. One scene saw a group of patrons acting as a diversion, keeping one of the parents occupied while the lovers made their escape. In another, you and Baxter were recruited to slide secret notes along the bar while nobody was looking. Even the band got to help, swapping one song in the program for another without warning. The singer's defiant aria transmuted into one of passionate, heartfelt longing. It was a flurry, the characters coming and going with a chaotic energy you normally could only see at a distance on a stage. And all through the carefully coordinated mayhem, the actual waiter diligently continued to cater to the patrons, serving more drinks, clearing tables, and lighting candles. It's not that serious. It's fun! It's fun seriousness! It's play! That's what it's a play. And, you know, sometimes that means pretending that something is more serious than it is. He ducked and weaved between chairs and bar stools and other characters, sometimes even participating in the action, but normally fading into the background. At one point, the singer and he almost collided, and would have sent a particularly hefty tray flying. But it was all part of the performance, and they both expertly caught the glasses before they fell, to loud approbation from the audience. The journey was precarious, full of twists and turns, but with everyone's help, the protagonists were finally able to face their feelings for each other. Hardly anyone could have resisted getting caught up in it. When the confession came at last, a deafening cheer went up. The two shared a kiss, and the room was plunged into darkness. The band struck up a lively tune, and when the lights came back on for all the actors took their bows to well-earned applause that seemed to last for hours. Finally, the floor cleared, the lamps dimmed to their usual twilight. It was finished. Love had triumphed. At least for one night. With that show over, things wound down for the evening. There were no more performances booked, although it was still a good while until closing. People could enjoy the room as a normal bar. The band continued to play, and patrons milled about with their drinks. Some people were animatedly discussing the performance he'd just seen. The atmosphere was convivial. Baxter let out a contented sigh and fiddled absent-mindedly with his second baby Bellini. He'd barely touched it since it arrived. Seeing that you were aimlessly looking around, he caught your eye with a tilt of the head and a quirk of his brow.
What do you think?
Now then, was the show to your liking? I'm all ears. And you can be honest, it can be a lot to take in. Are you kidding? It was so fun! I'm glad to hear that. They put a lot of effort into their craft. The dedication to entertainment is commendable. You might be interested to know the shows aren't always like this. They have quite a wide selection of different genres. The murder mysteries are always popular, but I wasn't sure how you'd feel about an interactive performance with the capacity for violence. Those can get rather intense, to say the least. Even the play we just saw is rarely performed the same way twice. As far as I've heard, they often chop and change the premise, shuffling the characters and events around as needed. You recall the ever-suffering friend, desperate to help the fated couple find love? Well, some nights it is they who charms the heart of the singer, or the bartender. In that situation, the third party is instead refusing their help out of kindness, not wanting to get in the way of their own possible romance. Sometimes the characters' families detest one another, Romeo and Juliet style. On those nights, the singer and the bartender dislike each other too, but pretend to fall in love in order to spite their own parents. And then, of course, it happens for real. Enemies to lovers. People love that trope. The fake dating leading to real dating. It's a popular one. That can be pretty fun. The fake relationship leading to a real relationship. That can actually be kind of a fun trope. And on rare occasions, they simply play hard to get, faking a quarrel for no reason other than to frustrate their would-be matchmakers, and laugh at them with the guests in private. So you see, there's an enormous potential for telling a whole host of different stories. But usually, the core idea is the same. The two characters, for whatever reason, are always talking past each other, always failing to communicate, and it's up to the audience to lend a hand. I think it's a fascinating concept, personally. A very novel form of entertainment. It is. It's a fun... It does seem like a good time. Not sure that I would be down for that myself, but it does seem like it'd be a really fun time for people who are into that sort of thing. You listen attentively to Baxter's explanation. Regardless of what you thought of the performance, it was nice to hear him passionate about something. He spun from side to side on his bar stool, a dry smirk on his face. I suppose I find the fundamental concept rather amusing, too. It's so obvious from the outside, the way the characters let their pride become an obstacle to their own happiness. As I said before, if they want each other so desperately, what point is there in saying the opposite? It's plainly not right, to yourself and the one you care for, and so unpalatable that it compels us and the supporting cast to action. Just right for interactive theater, I suppose. People's feelings aren't always as easy as that, though. I suppose, and what might be easy for one person may not be the same for another. Emotions are more nuanced and can't truly be replicated in other forms exactly. It's all relative. Eventually, a little voice in the back of your head prompted you to speak again. Thanks for tonight, for bringing me along. It honestly surprised me that Baxter had been able to get seats at such short notice. It seemed like the place was pretty popular. The performance he'd watched had been a full house. Unable to hide your curiosity, you put the question to the man himself. Where exactly did you get the tickets for this? Instantly, Baxter's face tensed, his easygoing smile losing some of its effortlessness and tugging down at the corners. That, of course. He crossed his arms in a way that struck you as mildly defensive. Maybe you remember the friends of my parents? The ones I visited recently. Well, it just so happens that they're in the performance business. Theater, ballet, musicals, all kinds of productions. They specialize in large-scale events of that nature. This venue isn't one of theirs, but they were able to pull some strings on my behalf.
Of course.
It's a question of knowing the right people who know the right people. We could have even had full backstage access with the main cast if I'd asked. As it was, we were singled out for some special attention during the show, on account of being seated at the bar. I'll have to remember to thank them for that. I'm sure they'd be pleased to know that my friend had a good time. You couldn't help it. Your eyes widened a little. You hadn't figured that Baxter would have that kind of ball. Yeah, it's not that much ball. Seeing your response, Baxter's features chilled further, his brows knitting together. He shrugged his shoulders in a sigh.
Truthfully?
I do try not to lean on that kind of thing too much, if you can believe me. I appreciate it might not look like it now. You could say it's a means for me to preserve my sense of independence. It's easy to be popular if you can foot the bill, and I don't want that to be what draws others to me. But after all that, here I am, leaning on the same old crutch. Nothing has changed since I was 6. How quaint. How wonderful. How truly excellent. As he rambled on, Baxter was speaking more and more inwardly, his tone increasingly acrid. Is this really any better than yesterday? What have I achieved? You could only sit and listen as the brief tirade continued. Had Baxter been sitting on this ever since the coffee shop? It was true, he hadn't come across as satisfied by reassurances, only by a second chance. But if he had known it would only make him feel worse, he wouldn't have let it get this far. Baxter managed to snap out of this train of thought, his attention returning to you. He looked rather sheepish.
Forgive me.
I'm sorry, Jamie. Perhaps it would be best to call it a night. I wouldn't want to sour the evening after such a charming showing. He swiftly rose from his bar stool, mind made up. You didn't stop him. Attempting the conversation in a public place wasn't a wise plan. I mean, you got a bar full of people willing to help out. They just helped out with the relationship. This one isn't a romantic relationship, but let them help here. Instead, you hurried to follow. Crossing the floor towards the exit, you passed the bartender and a few other cast members. You quickly expressed your appreciation to them and got cheery waves and thanks in return. Sounds and colors became a blur, and before long you had stepped out into the street. Baxter was already a few paces down the block, heading for his car, but he stopped for you to catch up. You exchanged a few pleasantries on the journey home, but nothing too involved. Baxter was making an effort to keep the conversation light, just as he promised. He really didn't want to leave a bad impression, that much was clear. Use the time and the space between sentences to mull things over. There was something that needed to be done, but you couldn't figure out what you could say. In your imagined scenarios, they would all end the same way, with him appreciating the sentiment while not believing. It was hard to think clearly. Your head was full of the smell of fake cocktails and snatches of remembered music, like the show and your life blending together in the shake of a mixer. You sank down into the soft leather of the car seat and let the images wash over you in waves. The stars were winkling playfully overhead as you arrived back in your own neighborhood. The moon was a yellow lantern, floating up high. You stepped out of Baxter's car and a sea breeze danced across your cheeks. After the summer heat of the daytime, it was cool and refreshing, like the first sharp sip of a nice drink. Baxter escorted you to the front door. He was, as ever, determined to be a gentleman. The deliberateness of it gave you pause, in a way that it hadn't until now. He lifted the corners of his mouth, and his eyes wrinkled. A perfectly arranged smile.
Good night.
Good night, Jamie. I had a wonderful time. The manner he said it made it sound less like he was expressing his feelings, and more like he was stating a want. As if he was determined that it should be true. Ever since his dip in mood at the end of the event, your mind had been filled with thoughts that you couldn't grasp hold of. Those questions pressed against you incessantly. Why was he still beating himself up over what happened yesterday? Why did he seem so unlike himself before he left the bar? What was going on in that head of his right now? Having bid you farewell, Baxter moved to leave. There was a priority in making himself scarce. In his eyes there was something like tiredness, something like fear. The prospect of some other sudden indignity rearing its head was too much for him to bear. He'd lost the chance to save face entirely in front of you by now. Best to cut things off at the roots. To see him like that tugged at your chest. You couldn't accept him going back to that empty house to wallow in frustration. But what could you do? Your mouth opened without anything to fill it, but the word somehow came anyway. Would you want to come inside? Things couldn't end here, that much was certain. What you needed was more time. Baxter paused. Having turned to go, the far side of him was in shadow. As he slowly swiveled back to you, and the light caught his face once more, his expression was conflicted. It held surprise, confusion, and no small amount of intrigue. His lips parted as if to speak, but his brow furrowed, and he closed his mouth again without a sound. He evidently had no idea where the present moment was leading. Neither did you. Baxter settled for a simple tilt of the head, his eyes posing a question. Well, no worries if not. I know it's getting late. But how about you come in and have a drink? It's been such a good night. I don't want it to be over so soon. Despite playing it off as nothing serious, you were silently willing Baxter not to go. Just a little longer. Hearing your elaboration, Baxter couldn't help but be amused. He recovered from his initial trepidation enough to laugh at your desperate plan. A drink, you say? A fascinating suggestion. How decidedly original of you. One eyebrow was raised, his voice dripping with irony. He quietly chuckled in kind, happy that he'd played along with the absurdity of the suggestion. Baxter's features relaxed into a look of fond regard, as his eyes searched your face for a moment. One hand was tucked casually into his back pocket. Though some of the attention appeared to be gone, his stance was still one of indecision, contemplation. For some reason, your imagination conjured up a vision of him at a woodland crossroads, standing just as he was now, carefully weighing which way to go. At length, his mind was made up. Baxter cleared his throat and straightened his stance, facing you square on.
That's sweet.
Thank you for the offer, Jamie. It's very kind of you to be so generous with your time. I should like to take up that suggestion, if it's no inconvenience. A drink would be lovely. A rush of relief hit. Thank goodness. You still had a chance to turn things around. He likely had a similar thought, though your ideas on what would achieve that were certainly different. Flashing a cheerful smile, you unlocked your front door and led the way inside. Baxter dutifully followed, pausing only to wipe his shoes on the doormat, just as Ma would want. All the lights were on in the living room, and there was a brief flash of panic at the prospect you'd lured Baxter into a run-in with your family at the worst possible time. As luck would have it, when you poked your head around the doorway, the room was empty. You couldn't hear movement. You were alone for now. So you gestured for Baxter to sit down and make himself comfortable. He graciously accepted the invitation. Rather than crash on the couch, he sauntered over to the table and pulled up a chair, prim and proper to the last. Having got this far, you willed the hostly components of your brain into motion. After seeing a professional like the bartender at work, you had some standards to live up to. Jeez. I hope this ends soon. It's almost 3 hours I've been doing this. I hope it's over soon. First things first, the technical reason for why you'd invited him. What do you want to drink? We have juice, milk, other things? Just water, please. I don't have the appetite for much else right now. His reply came without hesitation, but it lacked the usual degree of confidence you'd come to expect from him. The sound of it spoke volumes. While nobody could go so far as to call him fragile, there was no denying that Baxter was a long way from his usual bold self. Okay, water it is. You reached for a pair of glasses, deciding to stick with water yourself to keep things simple. After pouring some chilled water from the fridge, you brought the drinks over to the table and sat down across from Baxter.
Thank you.
Baxter sipped his water quietly, and placed it back down in front of him. It struck you fully how bizarre the situation would appear to anyone who happened to be watching. Two people sitting at the dining room table, dressed to the nines, gingerly sampling glasses of plain water. You mentally whispered an apology to the tender of the jazz bar. You were a little ashamed at your feeble imitation of his skills. It was a good thing your moms weren't around to see this either. They'd never let you live it down. Not in a million years. But that was all beside the point. You knew, and Baxter knew, that the pretext of coming over for a drink was simply that, a thinly veiled excuse. All this drinking is making me thirsty. I know, Vanna. Only a particular kind of emergency would necessitate visiting a neighbor's house for nothing more than a glass of water. And yet, in a way, it had been an emergency. A friendship emergency. You sincerely hoped that this brief, borrowed moment would give you both the chance to clear the air and reach some kind of mutual understanding. Baxter reached in to fiddle with the tumbler of water before him, though without lifting it to his lips again. He stared down into it, searchingly. After a while, he spoke.
I deeply apologize.
I feel like I must sound like a broken record at this point, but it's exceedingly considerate of you to extend your hospitality this far. Ungrateful. His gaze didn't lift, but one corner of his mouth did. It looked as though it took some effort. He maintained it just long enough to be sure you'd seen it, and then it dropped like a heavy weight. MLP line? Probably. It sounds like it'd be a My Little Pony line. He quietly sighed once, as though to catch his breath. He continued.
To be honest.
I must confess, however, if it were up to me, none of this would be happening. I find myself regretting my actions up to this point. Things would have been for the better if I had not said anything after the show. Or if you hadn't treated them as if they mattered. It was a brief moment of frustration, and it's caused so much trouble. An evening ruined by nothing and for nothing. And this was already my second go at inviting you out for an occasion. We don't need to retread what happened the first time. He tossed his head to one side and made a bitter sound with his tongue. I should be better than this. It irks me so much to make the same mistakes over and over. His voice trembled with frustration. His eyes dark and downcast. He dropped to a forceful whisper, repeating the words as if to convince himself of them, as if to nail them to his chest. I was better than this, wasn't I? Kind of two lines that are like, why do you feel you have to be? Is one of those, like, feels like a good line here. But also, I don't need you to do that. I just want you to talk to me. I kind of like this one. I don't need you to do that. I just want you to talk to me. You willed yourself to certainty. There is no room for equivocation. That's a terrible way to deal with emotions. You shouldn't bottle that kind of thing up and hide it from everyone. Baxter finally lifted his eyes to meet yours. They were narrowed, their intention unreadable. The cruel curve to his mouth spoke for itself, however. With a jolt, you realized it was a look of poorly disguised mockery. And still, you could tell it wasn't meant for you. When that cutting smile opened and the words came, pointed and pained and sharp, it was all aimed inward, at himself. This whole situation, it's asinine. I haven't known you long enough to be causing this kind of trouble. I'm quite literally a stranger. And I won't even be here long enough for that to change. As welcoming as you all are here, that can't be forgotten.
I swear.
I was, only ever supposed to be a part of the fun. A worthwhile piece of summer scenery. Someone who added to the experience, not held it back. You shouldn't have to baby me. To sit there and spend your time making me feel better when I don't keep it together. His hands were clenched on the table, the knuckles a shock of white. The mess I am in the mornings, the drama I cause in the evenings, the person I am when the show is over. Those aspects shouldn't be any of your concern. I don't provide that support to you, do I? And how could I when I don't know you? No, it's not fair to make you worried, or, worse, guilty over what happens to me. What matters is that when we're together, it's for the pleasant parts of existence. The less ideal shades of life can be managed separately. He slumped back a little in his chair, the power having gone out of his voice. That's all I wanted. The blood was still pounding in your ears. Witnessing Baxter like this, as he'd never seen him before, was equal parts exhilarating and shocking, his inner conflict now an exposed wire. How many times had you sat across from him these past few days? And how was it that only now did it feel like you were truly seeing the person in the chair opposite? You took a moment to process your thoughts, steady your breathing. Here, at last, was the crux of the matter. It was clear that when Baxter came to Sunset Bird, he had set himself a series of rules. Rules about how much to involve himself, how much of an impact to make. Like the tourist concept of leave only footprints behind, but taken to the extreme. There wasn't space for him to be complicated, to have negative emotions, to show different sides of himself to anyone. To do so would be a dereliction of duty. You weren't going to criticize him wanting his privacy. It was important to him, and you respected that. But this kind of framing, one where he had an obligation to minimize himself for others' benefit, it was only causing pain. In spite of what he felt was right, you cared too much about him by now to let him carry on like this. Cautiously, you opened your mouth. This is the only line I don't like here. I like this line, I like this line, I like this option. I like 3 of those options. You're my friend. Getting to know you makes it worthwhile, and you deserve more. too late, Baxter. You're not a stranger, you're my friend. You spoke earnestly and with as much composure as you could manage. Right now, more than anything else, Baxter needed to know how wrong he was. He wasn't a burden, and his feelings didn't hurt you. You tried your best to communicate this to him. You said your piece and went silent. The house lay still, and the windows were empty portals, black with night. The only sound was that of both your breathing. Baxter's eyes had been locked with yours during this speech, the last heat of his frustration smoldering within him. Now, in the quiet, you finally felt the embers fade completely. His gaze slowly lit to one side, and then slid, and then down. He swallowed. The sound drifted to you across the table, small and hushed. A sigh. Thank you. It was said simply, with no pretense or caveats. Nobody fucking cares, Baxter. I mean, kinda, Anna, kinda, a little. Baxter had given up the fight with himself for now, and accepted what you had told him. You let your body unclench as you watched the creases in Baxter's brow begin to disappear. A hand emerged from beneath the table to lift his glass, and he sipped his water, eyes closed. You took this as your cue that the discussion had run its course. There was no guarantee that things would change going forward. You weren't so arrogant as to think that Baxter's behavior would be altered all at once. Nothing drastic, anyway. He'd listened to your feelings, but who could really say how it would impact what happened in the future? The past couple days had held a mirror up to Baxter, showing him a reflection that wounded him, cutting too close to the bone. There were hurts there that ran deeper than he'd let you reach. It didn't mean he mistrusted you. It may not have been a matter of trust to begin with. But you hoped that, with time, Baxter might come to count on the fact that there was at least one person out there who would accepted him. You wanted to give him that. A souvenir to remember you by. The minutes passed, and sip by sip, the two of you drank your way towards the bottom of your glasses. The silence couldn't be called effortlessly comfortable, but it wasn't awkward. Companionable, perhaps. Baxter sucked in the last drops from his cup, and then moved to stand, unhurried. Thank you again. That was refreshing. Both the water and the conversation. Still, I should be going. He was matter of fact, with an air of calm finality. You weren't able to disagree. You nodded and rose in parallel, moving to take the glasses back over to the kitchen. You'd managed what you had set out to achieve. It was all right to let things end here for the time being. The night had spun around your way, and hopefully Baxter could see it as a positive when he reflected on it. You walked with him across the living room to the front door. With his back to you, you heard him begin to say something.
I appreciate the understanding.
I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this with me. For listening, in spite of... well... He gestured to himself, the meaning clear. Before you could tell him not to mention it, he reached the front door and came to face you. There was a mischievous grin on his face. You welcomed it like an old friend. But now, since the final act is over, how would we rate this event? I sincerely hope it was acceptable on the whole. The question had a laugh to it, and underneath there was the faintest hint of that self-mockery from before. But now it was toothless, empty of malice, and entirely in good humor. You couldn't help but snicker under your breath, full of affection. Oh, Baxter. How quickly he recovered his footing. A solid performance as always. I'm glad we did this. All of it. Thank you for a great evening out, and for coming over afterwards.
My pleasure.
Don't mention it. The pleasure was all mine. Good night, Jamie. Have a nice night, Baxter. Baxter liked you. Even if he didn't want you to know him, you were sure of that much. And then he made good on his promise to depart. Baxter stepped out into the dark night. The door shut behind him, and the long day came to a close along with it. When he was gone, you remained in the entryway a while, lost in thought. You'd see him again. Perhaps tomorrow, perhaps not. He might have plans. But there would be a next time. How could you not kiss after all that? Because I already have a boyfriend, Miss Honeybunny. You saw your face reflected in the dark glass window by the door, and found yourself wondering which Baxter you'd meet when the day came. Whoever he was, whenever it was, you'd be there. And damn, that was long. That was so long! Wow. Kinda hope the next two aren't as long as this one was. Man, wow. Did all this shit with Baxter and Dick. Yeah! Baxter's a friend. You can romance Baxter. At least I'm pretty sure. Like, I'm pretty sure if you choose not to romance Cove, then you can romance Baxter instead. You're satisfied, honey bunny? Glad you're satisfied. Yeah. I went for 3 hours. I should hope you're satisfied. But anyway, does he know we like Cove? Yes. Yes, he does. He thinks that we and Cove make a wonderful couple. He's rooting for us and Cove to work out. Want to know maybe the worst part about all this, though? I still wanted to record an episode of Star Trek Resurgence after this. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna end the stream here and rest my throat for a bit. And thanks for watching. And good night, everybody.